Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the continuation of the story that asks the question, who is the master of the touring car racing class car? For it is the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 6, round number 5 today, as we get ready to head into the Christmas break, while drivers have got one more task up their sleeve, and that is a daunting Alpha round in Hungary at none other than the Hungaroring circuit. Now, in terms of our schedule for tonight, let's take you through that schedule. Times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinated Time, that's UTC. The times are as follows, albeit delayed by 5 minutes due to some slight technical issues, and we do apologise for that, and we'll give you a little bit of information exactly what went wrong and why we've had to delay by 5 minutes. It will be now at a revised time approximately 10 to 8 this evening, so in just under 14 minutes time we'll be heading into our qualifying session, which will be 15 minutes in length, and we'll see all of our drivers out on the circuit looking to deliver their utmost best possible lap times in order to try and take pole position. The idea being around here, of course, as we'll come on to when we talk a little bit more specifically about the circuit, track position is going to be so key, of overtaking being limited, and what this being an Alpha round, that means there's only one race on the schedule, and that will follow up immediately after. It will be 8:05 this evening. The feature race, 60 minutes in duration, with a mandatory pit stop thrown into the mix, and who will come away with the biggest points haul going into the Christmas break, and really an early Christmas present. What this broadcast being on Christmas Eve, of course, and the racing you're seeing in the background today, well, this racing is not happening live at the moment. It occurred as of Monday earlier this week, the specific date being Monday the 19th of December, but we're bringing it to you as if it were live in this post-race broadcast, and therefore, as your host and commentator, I do not know what happens in the final practice session that's currently ongoing. I do not know what happens in the qualifying session, nor do I know anything that happens in the race. It's completely raw and new to me, and it was as close as possible, therefore, to the raw live experience that you guys and girls can receive and expect to receive at home. And if you are tuning in as well, the drivers who participated in this race, of course, we do ask that you avoid putting any spoilers into the chat in order to avoid spoiling it for myself as commentator, and also for our viewers, the most important people, of course, who will to get the most out of tuning in, week out. But in terms of media platforms for today, we are bringing this to you live via 2 media platforms for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you are a Twitch user, you can go to twitch.tv/TX141. Alternatively, if you're more of a YouTube user, you can go to youtube.com and search for TX141TX, alternatively Paul Walsh. Now, who is Paul Walsh? Well, that is I, your host and commentator. Allow me to formally introduce myself. My name is Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain of Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all of your racing action over all of the remaining rounds of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 6, and well, what a calendar we've had so far, and we've got plenty to look forward to tonight, and indeed after the Christmas break there's even more lying in wait. But let's tell you a little bit more about that calendar then. And as we can see here, now on to round number 5 of 13. We started off all the way back on the 7th of November at Belle Isle, the traditional opening circuit for the Alpha Touring Challenge. And the streets of Detroit, the wonderful street racing circuit, and Belle Isle absolutely delivering, as it always does in the opening Alpha round. We then made our way over from Detroit to Monterey County in the Californian state, in the United States, for Laguna Seca Raceway. And there on the 14th of November, we had our first sprint race round, of course comprising of 3 races, which amount to a total of 60 minutes of racing, much like the singular race on an Alpha round, but the difference there being, of course, that the points are spread over the 3 races, and therefore our drivers got ever more pressure on them to perform in each of the races, where they cannot just make up the time over a longer duration race. Instead, they've got to nail it out of the box and straight in the run to turn number 1. And then after round number 2, we made our way across the Pacific Ocean to Japan for the Fuji Speedway circuit, returning for Season 6, and then our second Alpha round, it was the rise of one Mika Hendricks, who absolutely flew the way and flew the flag high for Hassholz Motorsport, and well, did an absolutely fantastic job. Then we took a brief break, of course, in celebration of Thanksgiving, with it being a festive holiday out in the United States of America for a good number of drives where they're based from, and then we returned to round number 4, last time out at Suzuka, staying in Japan, and on the 12th of December there, it was 3 sprint races at the Grand Prix circuit and 3 absolute thrillers of races, and what we saw the continued dominance of Justin Rhodes in the Delta class, but we also saw the arrival of rookie to the series of James Logston, who flew high, albeit being featured in the Alpha class. James Logston putting down a key staple and looking to continue his run of form here tonight, but also the major battles up front in the Alpha class between the likes of Francois Schink and also Wojciech Swirodowic and Micah Hendricks, and more plenty of elbows out, and indeed it didn't just finish on the circuit, it finished in the steward's room. But wind on to today, we're at the Hungaroring circuit located in Hungary, returning to the European continent, and well, this circuit, which we'll introduce shortly, is going to be very different from the the first 4 rounds, because this is a circuit where overtaking is perhaps the most difficult any circuit on the calendar, and therefore we are really going to see that emphasis on track position. After this round, we'll be going into a Christmas break before returning for a continuation in Europe on the 2nd of January at Donington Park, the British circuit, of course, the heart of British motorsport, and there we'll have another sprint race round before then heading back across the channel and onto the European mainland continent for the Austrian circuit of the Red Bull Ring. The Grand Prix circuit this year not racing in what will be the national circuit, which of course saw sprint races last season, but in this season we're going to go for the fully fledged Grand Prix circuit over the course of an Alpha round. Well, that's going to be a very different tone of racing given the amount of slipstream available and the number of heavy braking zones. Now on the 16th of January we'll be going to the Nürburgring in the German state for what will be the Grand Prix circuit, where drivers will take it on 3 times in quick succession in 3 sprint races before then making our way away from Europe to Brazil, the South American continent, and particularly the Interlagos circuit. On the 23rd of January we'll be going to a circuit which is no stranger to championship drama, albeit we're going to be visiting it for round number 9 rather than round 12 or 13, and we'll have to wait and see whether Interlagos will continue to spin up major changes in the tide of championship momentum. Then we'll be returning to Europe one last time for the Rudskogen Motor Centre circuit, located in Norway, for our final sprint race round of the season in round number 10. And then on the 30th of January, we've got an absolute cracker to look forward to. Again, the Rudskogen Motor Centre circuit is quite a lesser known circuit unless you're in the Scandinavian territories, but you can imagine it is going to be a very fast and furious run from the Norwegian countryside, and one which is very heavily catered towards TCR class cars. And then round number 11, we're making our way back to the United States of America for a double run at Mid-Ohio firstly in an Alpha round. That'll be on the 6th of February, and then to Road Atlanta, the roller coaster ride which we concluded season 5 on, but it's not going to be our concluding round for season number 6. It'll be our penultimate round and another Alpha Challenge round on the 13th of February. And then we'll bring it all to a close on the 20th of February down under in Australia, where it'll be hot. It'll be sticky conditions, of course, what the fact that it is on the southern axis of the Earth globe, and it'll be the Bathurst circuit, or Mount Panorama as it's known in formality, whereby our drivers will be taking it on for the special challenge of this season. And more details on that, of course, later on as we get closer and closer to the season finale. But an absolutely action-packed calendar still awaiting us, and well, we are now on round number 5 at the Hungaroring. So let's introduce the circuit then. The circuit located in the Magyarország region of the Hungarian country, particularly Magyarország of Budapest, it being a smaller village located within the outer limits of the Budapest city, the capital city of Hungary. And well, a little bit of history for you regarding this circuit. Originally planned as a street circuit around the Hungarian capital city, in the end it was decided the circuit would not be built or run within the capital city, but instead on the outskirts, and this was due to a number of reasons, some of them political and some of them economical. But the key thing is that whilst it was moved out of the city's limits, the circuit has still retained a street circuit vibe to it. Consisting of 14 corners, you can see from the circuit map writers by simracingwiki.com. Thank you to them as always for their circuit maps. This circuit, whilst it looks so it is going to be one that offers major overtaking opportunities, far from it. In the run down towards turn number 1, that's why the heavy braking zones where overtaking can come quite easily, and also in the run to turn at number 2, and also perhaps the run from turn 11 to turn 12. But beyond that, overtaking becomes very difficult because the circuit doesn't necessarily narrow, but what it does do, it starts to become highly technical. With 3 sectors available to it, with the first sector running from the start finish line all the way out to the entry into turn number 4. And then the second sector running from turn 4 all the way to the conclusion of turn number 11. And the final sector running from the runoff of turn number 11 all the way through to the final stages and the conclusion of the lap. That means the majority of the lap is focused around sector 2. And well, as you can see there, turns 4 through to 11, they all come in quick sequence and succession. Then multiple direction changes. And the key most prevalent thing is there's very little room to offer a run for an overtaking opportunity. So that means as a driver, you need to be on the ball in qualifying in order to get track position on the grid, then get the run down towards turn number 1 nailed, and then you may just find yourself pocketing a major result. But of course the downside of it is, and the reason why this circuit is highly controversial, whether you talk to Formula 1 drivers or indeed drivers of other classifications of cars such as GT3 or somewhere in between, some love this circuit because of the amount of pressure it puts on the driver to perform well in qualifying and indeed not make a mistake in the race. Because of how technical this circuit is, it is one of the most physically demanding circuits on a traditional calendar, albeit we don't have a major elevation change, far from it, so it's not as challenging as say, circuits in Mexico or Brazil where you have a high altitude, but instead this circuit being located in the depths of a valley, it's quite low altitude, and that focuses on the run through the circuit, indeed those physical changes of direction change, braking, and everything in between that puts the G-forces through a driver's neck. For some drivers, absolutely love that. Others dislike it because of the lack of overtaking opportunities, and therefore if you have a bad qualifying session, well, you're going to really have difficulty per se in making your way up through the field. But of course, there have been real-world examples of where that's not proven true, and perhaps the most notable one being the 2006 Formula 1 Grand Prix, where Jenson Button coming from all the way down towards the back of the grid to take his maiden win in Formula 1 at this circuit, albeit aided by some very dramatic and lucky moments, you could argue. Particularly the heavens open up to provide a lot of rain. We're not expecting any rain today, and also a number of major drivers up front taking one another out of the race. But that could happen here, of course. What can happen in the real world can happen in the sim racing world, because whilst the race is not real out on actual tarmac, all the emotions and everything else is definitely real, and that's why we love sim racing. But enough about our circuit then. Let's take a quick reminder of our race rules going into tonight. Firstly, in terms of setup, our drivers can bring open setups to the circuit. They bring whichever setup they choose, but car fuel loads have been restricted to 45% for this round. That means that our drivers will need to pit to take on fuel, and you can see that as the first rule of the Alpha race format. The second rule, of course, being that drivers shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 13 or more instant points, and these can be accrued for track limits and contact. A driver shall be disqualified if they accumulate a total of 16 instant points. They won't be doing that then. And in terms of bonus points being available today, it's 1 point for pole position. That is overall pole position and not class pole position. There's 1 point for the fastest lap overall in the race. There's also 1 point for the Sublime Finesse Award, which is the fewest instance over the round. 1 point for leading a lap at any point in the race, and 1 point for the Naked Aggression Award, which is the most overtakes made by a driver in the round. But that's enough rules and regulation, and of course we'll be giving you an update on the championship standings come the end of tonight. Let's head back to our pictures here as our drivers get ready to go racing. And well, as we do see here, Matt Shepka parked up in the pit lane at the moment, deciding not to go out again with only 3.5 minutes to go. We do have 3 drivers who deserve introduction today, as it is their first round in the series, and we see here the introduction of the Delta driver of James Vance, the privateer here in the Audi RS3. And for those of you wondering how can we tell who's an Alpha and who's a Delta, and also what's the difference between an Alpha and a Delta, well, the Alphas may be considered the pros of this series, whereby they are the fastest of the drivers and competing at the highest possible level. Meanwhile, the Deltas could be considered to be the AMs through to Pro AMs, whereby those drivers are continuing to learn. They may be rookies or somewhere in between, but they're gradually building their craft and will be looked to be promoted to the Alpha class in the near seasons that are upcoming. Of course, after season 6, there's definitely going to be a season 7, if not more, as we briefly lose James Vance there, and then he does rematerialise from the ether. I think a little bit of connectivity issues coming on in, but hopefully those do not rear their ugly head over the race and potentially take him out of the race. But James Vance, one of our 3 newcomers for this round. We also do have 2 other newcomers to introduce, and well, those do include John Hinman, who we can see parked up there. In fact, let's see if we can get a bit of a closer camera angle to Hinman. Well, we can't quite get a close one to the privateer. He's a little bit shy from the cameras at the moment, which is probably due down to the poor camera positioning. We can see there the privateer in the Hyundai Elantra N, and we also do have the newcomer of Jacob Wally as he makes his way down towards turn number 12. I think that's how you say it, his surname. We're going to go with it there, and I'm sure he'll correct us in the YouTube chat if we do happen to get it wrong, or afterwards, of course. I'm no stranger to getting surnames wrong. It has become a bit of a Walshism, if you will, much like the late Murray Walker being known for his Murrayisms. Well, we're getting Walshisms appearing left, right and centre over time. But enough about me focusing on our drives. We wish our newcomers, of course, all the best of luck today, and Wally running around in the privateer Elantra N as well. Quite a popular car, of course, the Elantra N, known for its 1 lap pace, but not necessarily its durability over the course of the race in terms of tyre wear in particular. And then we have got a total of 20 drivers in attendance today, and with the other 17 you've seen racing already this season, including Robert Abrams here for Yellow Flag Motorsports. As they make their way down towards turn number 1, just to explain what the technical issue was that was holding us up from going racing, and we do apologise for that. Unfortunately, the broadcasting software that we do use to provide you with all the overlay that you see, so the circuit map in the top right corner, the time and town on the left hand side, and all other items, that was unfortunately glitching out and returning to a set of default values from the software provider. And what we didn't want to lose out and being able to have your traditional timing tower and what you typically love to see on screen, so we were applying a fix to make sure that we could have that, and that fix was deployed literally as we were about to go racing, and that's why we had the 5-minute delay. But the time tower's all there now, and we have the circuit map as well, so that's all been resolved for you. And well, we're just under a minute to go before we head into qualifying. We will shortly have to cut away in order to make sure we can jump forward to the qualifying session in this iRacing replay file as provided by Matt Shepka. Thank you to Shepka for that. And that way, when we jump forward to the qualifying session, we do it in such a manner so we do not reveal what the qualifying times are, and well, the qualifying session will be as the lap times come in, and therefore no spoilers in terms of who takes pole position in overall, the Alpha and also the Delta classifications. But as we see, Eric Statson making the way down towards turn number 12. We do say hello in the YouTube chat there to Fujiwara No Soul. We also say hello to Charisma and Assuming One. And to all of you tuning in at home right now, whether you're celebrating Christmas today, tomorrow, or in another day, whether you're working, alternatively taking it easy and putting your feet up or somewhere in between, Merry Christmas to you. I hope you're all doing well, and we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. A very brief moment to go qualifying, as now the checker flag comes out in practice. It's time for our drivers to take to the circuit in anger for the first time today. So as qualifying's about to get underway, ladies and gentlemen, our drivers are making their way down the pit lane very shortly. And, well, we can see here Francois Schinck, one of the first drivers to make the way out. 15 minutes, it's go, go, go. And, well, all our drivers will leave nothing on the table here. Not that they necessarily do so in any qualifying session, to be fair, but this is the one qualifying session you do not want to leave a single tenth on the table, because doing so may cost you multiple places and therefore make your life much harder when you go into the race. Now, some other little bits of information regarding the Hungaroring circuit. For those of you interested in little tidbits of information, this circuit is also known to have one of the most strangest evolving circuit surfaces on a racing calendar. Now, why is that? Well, given the fact this circuit is in the middle of a valley and a lot of wind does typically blow through the circuit, what that means is normally track surfaces you will see over the course of racing sessions, where it be practice, then qualifying and then the race, you normally see the rubber gradually get pushed across to the particular side of the circuit off of the racing line. At the Hungaroring, given the way the winds blow down through the valley, and typically the winds do not come that strongly onto the circuit itself, normally any rubber that does start to accumulate on the circuit, it will start to be blown across the circuit in such a manner whereby there's not that clear run of rubber off the race line. Normally the track surface as a whole does not evolve that much, and instead what it means is that the track surface actually becomes quite a slippery surface throughout the entirety of racing sessions. Now, also add to that due to the fact that the circuit's located in the valley, track temperature really comes up aggressively and it does not fade away. And when drivers have raced here in the middle of spring, for example, or even in autumn, what they typically stated is that the circuit feels as though it's racing on a circuit that's currently in summer conditions, because it gets so hot and that heat does not dissipate off of the tarmac. And that's something our drivers will need to be wary of with regards to the Hungaroring circuit, as it does really take prisoners with regards to even the smallest of errors, and also it is a very prickly circuit to make laps around. But speaking of making their laps on around the circuit, right now we can see Francois Schinck heading across the timeline to go onto their first flying lap, and we'll ride on board for their second flying lap, of course, with the fact they need at least 2 laps, the out lap plus 1 flying lap, in order to get some tyre temperature and really get the car into natural flow. But in terms of our championship contenders here, we talk about our Delta Championship leader going into tonight, and that is none other than Justin Rhodes, currently leading with an advantage which was extended at Suzuka to 35 points ahead of Eric Statson. So Justin Rhodes does seem to be the big name on the game at the moment as he makes his way through turn number 1, and can anybody close him down? And the challenge, of course, will be for Eric Statson, who's currently running P2 in the class. Due to a difficult set of performances at Suzuka, he's ended up falling closer and closer to his main rivals who are chasing after him, the likes of Kurt Smith, for example, and also Adrian Fedorowski. And we can see Adrian Fedorowski here making the way through turn number 1 in the Honda Civic Type R. What that has bought Justin Rhodes is an amount of breathing room which he can really capitalise on tonight in order to try and break away. Of course, the converse could be if Justin Rhodes does not hook it up today, then he may find himself falling back into the clutches of that battle for P2 and subsequently a battle for the championship lead. Meanwhile, as we look to what is the Alphas, and we see Jerome Bagilas making the way through turn number 4 in what has been a very varied season so far for the Beaver Buzz driver. Not quite up there at the very top, but contesting hard to be inside the top 5 at this time. The Alpha Championship leader and overall championship leader going into tonight's round is none other than Mika Hendricks, of course. That brilliant run of results at Suzuka, albeit with a few elbows out with closest rival Swirodovic. And well, where is Wojciech Swirodovic, I hear you ask? Well, here they are, the private team making the way through turn number 12 and into 13, and we're expecting plenty between the two of them tonight, with a margin of only 14 points between what is Hendricks and James Carr, who's jumped into P2 ahead of Swirodovic, who lost out considerably, but Swirodovic not too far behind, within 30 points to the championship leader. But as they make their way through the final corner, we look to Francois Schinck, who makes the way across the timeline, and we ride on board with them as they take you around for a flying lap of the Hungaroring circuit. So looking in towards turn number 1 and heading in towards the braking zone here, braking the 100 metre ball, coming all the way down the gearbox to second gear, dropping to first on the apex, a little slide there due to the rear brake bias, and now powering out up towards turn number 2. Now in the run to turn number 2, you'll notice the circuit starts to grow downwards slightly in terms of it depresses into the apex curve, down to second gear, braking at about 70 metres and hooking nice and tight to the apex curve, keeping over to left here for turn number 3, as now through the right-hander, flat out here, clutching over the apex curve, and now up the hill towards turn number 4. That's sector 1 complete, as he gets ready to go into the braking zone for turn 4, and here it's about going onto the brakes at about 65 metres from corner apex, trail braking in and then powering on through and up towards turn number 5, over to left onto the brakes, trail braking all the way into a late apex in and getting back on the power in second gear. We'll head up towards the chicane. Now getting ready for the chicane. This is about straight line between the two apexes at turn 6 and 7, onto the brakes, down to second, straight line between them, take plenty of apex at turn number 7, and now in towards turn number 8, and through here we go, staying in third gear, down to second on transition, now back up to third, down to second once again, and well, you can see here Shink really trying to balance the car on through as they now make their way into left-right sequence to 10 and 11, flat out through 10, onto the brakes for 11, a bit more of an open right hand here compared to turn number 9, and as they come out of the corner, that's sector 2 complete, as they now head down towards turn number 12. Onto the brakes here, about 75 metres, down from 4th to second gear, and as they power out at 55 miles an hour, now making the way up towards turn number 13, hitting the rev limiter there, that's not what you want, as he makes his way into the penultimate corner in first gear, riding high on the apex curve, powering out here, using the run into the pit entry there, drivers are allowed to do that. Now brings it over to left for turn number 14, into third, down to second, and as he powers out the corner, plenty of runner space on the left hand side, uses all of it as he heads towards the timeline. Well, it's going to be an improvement that from Francois Shink, but what's it going to be? It's an improvement there in terms of provisional pole to 56.469. But what else is out there in terms of lap time at the moment? And we do normally see the best lap times in qualifying at the Hungaroring come right at the end of the session, given how the track surface will really come up in temperature as time goes on, and therefore the driver's tyres will be in their optimum window right at the end of the session, maximum temperature in the tyres. But as we can see here already, the gap between P1 and P2 has been held by Spiridoric as they make their way in towards turn number 2. The Audi RS3 driver only off a pole by 600ths at the moment as they come roaring through the left-hander. And to answer the question that was postulated earlier by Fujiwano So in the YouTube chat about what's the more challenging part of this round in our opinion, strategy, overtakes or endurance or concentration, it will be a combination of strategy and overtakes. Any drivers who find themselves qualifying out of position, such as Yellow Flag Motorsports' Connor Achatella right now, who's currently P11 or P8 in the Alphas, overtaking it is really going to come difficult in terms of those race conditions, given how tight it is. And we've already seen that on board with Francois Shink on the onboard lap, but also from the third person perspective cameras that we see here as our drivers make the way on the round. And given those difficulties, you can imagine you may have all the pace in the world, but if you can't find a way past the driver in front of you who may be even half a second off of you in terms of pace, then all that pace is worth naught. Then you've got to consider strategy as well. And remember, there is no pit window for our drivers. They may choose when they pit, but they do have to take on fuel in order to get to the end of the race. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some drivers deploy the undercut versus some drivers going for as much as possible of an overcut, and the difference between that is the undercut is when you pit earlier than everybody else in order to try and come out and clear air, deliver lap times and leapfrog ahead of those who pit later. The overcut is the opposite of that. You stay out and try and pit as late as possible. You want to be the last person to come into the pits, so that way you hold track position. Of course, the risk of that is if you do not come in sooner rather than later, then you may find yourself dropping off the pace, particularly when there's a tyre change involved. But we're not expecting any of our drivers to change tyres here today. We're expecting them all to run this race on a single set of tyres, although some may wear down those front tyres a bit aggressively and may be prone to need to take a front tyre change. But normally what we've seen over the course of all of our Alpha rounds is our drivers start the race on the tyres they intend to finish on. But Achatella makes their way out the final corner and they head towards the timeline. Have not improved in sectors 1 and 2. What about sector 3? They did improve in sector 3. Is it enough to move them up the board? No, it is not. It's not an improved lap. Meanwhile, David Bauer behind for breakfast and dinner improves sizably up to P4 then, a 56.752. Shepka moves up to P5 and a 56.870. But as we look a little bit further back, how are our newcomers getting on, I hear you ask? Well, right now, absolutely flying, albeit he's had to jump to the pit. Jacob Owali has taken Delta provisional pole, P6 overall, and will Justin Rhodes will raise one eyebrow at that, I'm certain, given he's in P8 at the moment. As we look to James Logsdon here, making their way through turn number 4 and up into 5. And Logsdon, of course, debutant last time out, Suzuka, put in a good set of results, and I would not be surprised if Logsdon continues that trend tonight, albeit wants to try and get inside that top 5, but we know how close it is. But speaking of someone who's just jumped into that top 5, Hendricks goes P3 for Hasholz Motorsports. with what is that, 56.542. A nice lap being set by the Veloster driver. And the question, of course, so you may be asking at this point is which of the touring cars brought to this circuit today out of the two Hyundais, the Veloster and also the Elantra, the Honda Civic Type R and also the Audi RS3, which one of them is going to be the best for this circuit? Well, I would argue that the Veloster is probably going to be the strongest car if you treat all drivers as equal, but it also will come down to the driver in terms of how much they enjoy this circuit, because the more you enjoy this circuit, then naturally the more aggressive your lap times will become and the faster you'll be in this qualifying session. And that's why the car that some would argue is perhaps not ideal for the Hungaroring, the Audi RS3, with its higher end gear ratio and focusing around full through to 6th gear. All right, now Swierdowicz has put the car on pole, but as soon as I say that, he's demoted to P2 once again by rival Francois Schink, who has taken up pole position back of a 56.097. Swierdowicz crosses the timing line, then heads down towards turn number 1, and we will ride on board here with the Audi driver to see what his secrets are as he makes his way in towards the turn 1 hairpin. So braking now about 80 metres, going all the way down to 3rd gear and powering out to the corner. Of course, can't drop to 2nd in the Audi, too much wheel spin over the front tyres. With all these cars being front engine, front wheel driving, the front tyres through the power deployment and also the main cornering aspects. And as he comes into turn number 2, braking there at about 70 metres, coming all the way down to 3rd gear, getting a nice run on the power, nice and early, brings the car to the left before swinging it to the right. And this Audi, of course, can be very aggressive over those raised apex curves. It's a very heavy car on that front end. And as he makes his way out the hill in towards turn number 4, braking there at about 75 metres, coming into left-hand and drops to 4th, brings the car over to the left-hand side for turn number 5, rolls it under brake and stays in 4th. Does he drop to 3rd? No, decides to do the entire corner in 4th, and as he comes out now, heads up towards the chicane of 6-7, onto the brakes here, braking just before the marshal's post, down to 3rd, straight line in between the two apexes and heading up towards turn number 8. And this is where we may see the Audi founder a little bit with regards to its gearing, as we see having to stay in 4th gear, really having to be careful with the throttle input, coming out of turn number 9 into 10 and accelerating up towards almost 5th gear, but back onto the brakes here for turn number 11, rolling on out and down towards 12 and getting ready to head up into 5th gear now surely. Yep, up into 5th and onto the brakes for turn number 12, braking there at about 70 metres as he comes down to 3rd gear, misses the apex very slightly. You can see the car there understeering wide of the apex. That's going to cost him about half a tenth in the run to turn 13. Not the way that Swierdowicz wanted it to go, and of course Schink's lap that we rode on board with was compounded with a hit of the rev limiter into turn 13. But as we see Swierdowicz now come to the final corner, coming on through here, 3rd gear, going to power out nice early up into 4th. What's it going to be for Swierdowicz as they cross the timeline in Bruden sector 2? It's pole position for the Audi driver of 56.070 as they make their way down towards turn number 1. 3 minutes to go plus overtime available to our drivers, and Schink now only stands 26 thousandths off a pole position. Meanwhile, P3 there, a whole tenth of our pole sitter in this James car, who makes his way for the right-hander. Of course, P2 in the Alpha Championship and overall going into tonight. And a reminder that our Alpha and Delta drives all score from the single points pool of the overall championship points. There are no specific points classifications for either set of drivers. And as car makes their way down towards turn number 1, we're not improving at the moment. They'll be pleased, I think, with the 2nd row. But given the shootout for pole position between Swierdowicz and Schink, I wouldn't be surprised if Carr, Hendricks, Bauer and Shepka all want to try and creep their way into that. Meanwhile, in terms of some of our other newcomers today, well, we've got John Hinman, who we see making the way across the timeline, not improving from P19 at the moment. Mark Darnell, meanwhile, not at the circuit at this time. I believe some technical issues with the Hyundai, and we may see them on the grid for the race, but they'll be starting from the back. And, well, right now, Hinman not able to find the time in qualifying. It would seem quite a way off the pace, but to be fair, whilst they may be off the pace in this round, it may not be a circuit that favours them. They've got plenty more rounds to see whether they can get a little bit close. And, of course, some drivers coming into this as complete rookies in TCR racing. We don't know specifically for Hinman, but all the same, a rookie to the Alpha Touring Challenge, and everybody of every skill level is welcome. And, well, lastly, what about James Vance? Well, they're currently P15, P4 in the Delta qualifying positions. They come to the timeline and not improving there from their previous best of 57.65, but the privateer in the Audi putting in a good start to his qualifying campaign with a lap that's stronger than Eric Stats. And, of course, Eric Stats are P2 in the Delta Championship going into this round. So Vance right now definitely putting down a major yardstick in able to out-qualify one of the big names in the Delta class, as we do see Statzer making the way through the turn 6-7 chicane. But as they head on through, Francois Schinkler, you can see on the time towers, really surge into pole position, but the Swindurich takes it back there by a whole tenth this time. But as we said earlier, those qualifying times, the best ones, will come in right at the end of the session. And as we do see Swindurich making the way into turn number 1, we have it clarified from Darnell there, Mark Darnell in the YouTube chat, saying second car swap of the season for me, so no qualifying of course, and that's a good point there. If drivers do go for a second car swap, they are not permitted to take part in qualifying in the next round, so Darnell will be starting from the back, and well, we'll have to wait to see how Darnell gets on from the back of the grid, but thank you for clarifying, Mark. We really do appreciate that. But right now, what all the drivers will be appreciating is if they can improve a little bit right at the end of the qualifying session, as we do have Shepka and Bauer into the pits. Swindurich is coming in as well, and I think we've got also Abrams and Vance in, also Wally and also Logston coming in. So right now, there's only a limited number of drivers out there on the circuit, but they'll look to have the circuit in its best possible condition. And as we see here, Hendricks coming to the timeline, did improve in sectors 1 and 2. They will get one more lap in, just about, literally at the depth there of about 2 seconds as they cross the line. And well, they didn't improve this time, but they're going to give it all on the final lap. Meanwhile, what about elsewhere? We do look to Logan McKenzie, and well, here's the surprise. Yellow Flag Motorsports are really struggling. Yellow Flag Motorsports, none of their drivers are in the top 10. McKenzie is P12, Achitella P13 and Abrams P14. As we see there, McKenzie with a little snap on the front end on turn into 13, and this is the weakest qualifying session we have seen from Yellow Flag Motorsports. And well, they're all going to be starting, it would seem, outside the top 10 unless Achitella can pull a blinder out the bag at the last possible minute. Francois Schenk comes into the pits. He's had enough. He doesn't think he can improve any further, and I think pole position will be going to Swindurich as a result. Meanwhile, Kurt Smith here in the Hyundai Veloster, we haven't really talked about too much since the start of today's program. They also coming in. What about James Logston? Sorry, not James Logston, John Lauzon behind. Lauzon does not improve, and they stay on the line into the pits, so they are not going to be improving from P8 on the grid. We've also got James Carr here, and James Carr says, I am improving, as he makes his way into the final corner. He's got an improved sector 2, but what about sector 3? He's got a bit of 56.07, his previous best. He comes around, can he dip into the 55s? He comes high, flash of lights there, and it's pole position for James Carr at 55.689 right at the finish. And what can Achitella do? Achitella does not improve. I believe we've also got Eric Statzer still coming around to finish their qualifying session, and John Hinman. We've got 2 more out there. Adrian Fedorowski's headed out just to get some track time. Eric Statzer puts 2 wheels on the grass there and gets away with it as he makes his way on through. But can Statzer find a way to get from P17, his weakest qualifying performance of the season so far? He crosses the timeline, he does not improve. What about Hinman behind? Hinman does improve to a 59.923, does not gain any positions, but does improve in terms of lap time there. Puts him at only 1 second off of Fedorowski's time in P18. But that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen. And well, James Carr leaving it all to the final lap with a 55.689 when all the track was rubbered into perfection. And James Carr, your pole sitter today, your alpha pole sitter and overall. And meanwhile, in the Delta class on his debut, Jacob Wally taking pole position. But with that, let's transition over to the grid for the purposes of our one and only race, and this is how they line up. James Carr takes pole position for breakfast for dinner for 55.692, 2 tenths clear of Wojciech Swindurich, they're the privateer in P2. Behind them on row number 2, Francois Schenk from Beaver Buzz, joined by Hassholz Motorsports' Mika Hendricks. And then of row number 3, the alpha pair of David Bauer for breakfast for dinner and Matt Shepka for Torque Steer Racing, with Delta pole sitter of Jacob Wally P7, the privateer, joined on the fourth row by John Lauzon from Beaver Buzz. Then on row number 5, we have the Delta pair of Justin Rhodes and Kurt Smith, not too far behind the debutant in the Delta class, and they'll be looking to try and get the jump on him into turn number 1, and that's the top 10 completed. We then have behind the not last motorsports driver of Kurt Smith, James Logston's privateer machine in P11, and he is joined on the 6th row by Logan McKenzie from Yellow Flag Motorsports. Then on row number 7, in the weakest qualifying performance of the season for Yellow Flag Motorsports, Connor Achitella in P13, joined by the privateer of James Vance P14, and then behind them on the 8th row we have Robert Abrams and Jerome Bajulaz, followed up by Eric Statson and John Hinman on the 9th row, and it's Adrian Fedorowski from QZ Motorsports and Mark Darnell, the privateer, who complete the final row of the grid. 20 drivers out of 20, and we can see that Fedorowski and Darnell both not setting valid times, and Darnell of course not permitted to set a time, and Fedorowski's time not counting. But we look to the grid, it is time for the lights. And it's lights out and away we go for round number 5 of season 6 of the Alpha Touring Challenge, and James Carr gets a good start as they charge down towards turn number 1. Now as they make the way down, of course the Audi will pick up some speed in the draft, but will it be enough here? Swiridoric looks at a move on the inside, further back Schink gets a good start as well. David Bauer jumping ahead of Hendricks as they come into turn number 1, and you can see here Bauer on the outside, Hendricks dives to the inside as behind, Shepka and Lauzon also toe to toe. Further back we can see that Jacob Wally has dropped back behind McKinsey and Rhodes as they make the way in towards turn number 2 here, and Justin Rhodes getting an absolute flyer of a start. Wally losing out considerably by comparison as they come down to the braking zone, and you can see as they come on in, Robert Abrams gaining 2 places in class 4 in overall positions off the line as they make the way down towards turn number 3, and Jacob Wally under pressure now from Abrams as they make the way on up the hill as Jerome Bajulas, meanwhile P12 here also gaining a multitude of places as they come on up towards the braking zone for the first time of asking. Further back Mark Darnell starting from the back of the grid, he's battling already with Adrian Fedorowski as he's jumped ahead of him and in the run towards turn number 4. But as they come up towards turn number 5 right now, you'll see that they'll start to stagger out. Further ahead, James Logston having a difficult start, losing 4 places off the line, bogging down off the start line is where to understand it. And as they come into the chicane for the first time of asking it, all in quick line astern succession, beautiful to see as the touring car machines roar their way past the cameramen. And as they come in towards turn number 8 now, well this is where we'll start to see all the drivers immediately experience the controversial part of the Hungaroring, which is you can't really overtake in sector 2, instead you just have to tuck in behind, albeit James Vance here having a difficult run out of turn 9 into 10, and as a result he has got Connor Agitella all over his backside as they make the way out of 11 and down towards 12. Now will we see a move from Agitella? He's close, he's within a 10th, but Vance is covering it off here, and of course he's permitted to do so. The Deltas can battle with the Alphas, and they have every right and want to do so because they get more points the more Alphas finishing behind them. And as they make the way into turn 13, no change at the moment there, but we look up towards the front of the field here, and here is your race leader, breakfast for dinners, James Carr, who after a great start held off the charge of Wojciech Swiridoric, and he leads after 1 lap. So going on to lap number 2, it's Carr ahead of Swiridoric, followed by Schink, then David Bauer in P4, Hendricks P5, followed by John Lauzon in P6, then Shepka P7, Rhodes P8, your Delta leader as he makes his way up behind Shepka in the run towards turn number 1. Will he look for the move here, or will he just simply stay behind? We'll have to wait and see. As you can see further back, and McKinsey and Wally completing the top 10, followed by Abrams P11, then we have Jerome Bajulas P12, followed by what is there, Kurt Smith, or in fact we look to Kurt Smith and Eric Statzer battling side by side further back there in the hunt for P16. Statzer defending versus Kurt Smith as they make the way down towards turn number 2 now. He holds onto the position for the time being, but the privateer under pressure. But to jump a little bit further back up here, we look back to Jake Wally and Robert Abrams. Wally on the outside there into 2, and coming into 3 you have the inside line, but Robert Abrams says no, I'm going all the way round, thank you, and he gets it done there. Jacob Wally drops to P11, Robert Abrams up into P10, Jerome Bajulas behind in P12, followed by James Vance P13, then we have Connor Agitella P14, followed by James Logston P15, and it's Logston, well in fact it's Statzer I should say, followed up, we'll cut that full for a brief moment ladies and gentlemen, because Bajulas there looking for the move on the inside of Wally as they come through turn number 5, into 6 they go, but Wally defending hard right now as they come through the chicane, and he's under pressure as we ride on board the gearbox of Wally and bring up the battle box for your information in the bottom right corner of your screen. But the privateer definitely feeling the pain and the pressure as they come on through the technical sequence of corners that is sector 2, and I wonder how long it'll be before Bajulas tries to take another peek up the inside into a corner here. I don't think it's too far away, but Wally to be fair showing a great amount of defensive concentration as they come for 11 and down towards 12 once more. But in that long run of course for Wally, he wants to finish inside the top 10. He definitely wants to finish where he is at the moment, P2 in the Delta class, because that'll give him a good haul of points to start of his championship campaign. As they make the way out to 12 and in towards 13, Bajulas not close enough to put the pressure on at this time as they come on through. We briefly lost Vance, I believe that may be just due to connectivity as he rematerialises on our timing tower there, but we'll keep you informed if we do have any formal retirements. Meanwhile we look from battling outside the top 10 to a bit further up inside the top 10, and this is David Bauer under pressure from Hendricks as they come across the timeline once again to go into lap number 3 in this hour of racing as they make the way on down, and you can in fact see there looking even further back what we talked about, these two battling for the run to turn number 1, and it's Statzer versus Smith once again. That's Kurt Smith who looks around the outside, onto the brakes they go. Statzer there, he's being compressed, the apex curve. Smith there trying to get Statzer to back out, but Statzer simply saying no, I'm not just going to disappear, thank you very much, and they carry on. Great racing between the two of them, but Eric Statzer not afraid to get his elbows out in order to make sure he's safe and dry in P16 and P4 in the Delta class as the two Delta drivers continue to fight the way through the circuit. But meanwhile we look to Justin Rhodes here, the Delta leader currently in P8 under pressure from Logan McKinsey as they make the way through turn number 4 and up into 5, and will Rhodes really feeling that pressure as they come on through the hairpin sequence corner corner now, but you can see Shepka just in front as well, having a poor run through 4 and losing out in the run behind Nelson and Hendricks up the road, and now falling back into the clutches of the road to McKinsey as they come through the chicane. But the question is, of course, how much tyre saving may be going on from some of our drivers here in order to give themselves better tyres towards the end of the race, where they can really turn the tempo up and put the pressure on. We'll have to wait and find out, because the Elantra ends in particular really sensitive to that front tyre wear in warm track conditions. We will see the track temperature here rise dramatically as the racing goes on, but as the drivers make the way through turn number 11 once more. For now, it does seem to be all the status quo as they head on down towards turn number 12. We ride on board with Logan McKinsey. You saw a little bit of a peak there from Rhodes on Shepka. I think Rhodes is starting to feel as though Shepka is holding them up as they make the way through 12 and into 13. Or is that just a sign of Rhodes trying to get into Shepka's head and make Shepka make an unwanted mistake as they make the way through 13 and up towards 14? McKinsey here, of course, with a difficult qualifying session, much like all of Yellow Flag Motorsports, all qualifying outside the top 10, but all managing to find their way up the order. And in particular, McKinsey has been able to get themselves inside the top 10. So has Abrams. Actually has not had that fortune as they make their way down towards turn number 1. But you can see here McKinsey falling back by comparison with Rhodes as Rhodes takes another look there versus Shepka. But Shepka able to outbrake Rhodes. Of course, the Honda, the one thing he does best than everybody else is outbraking its rivals. But Shepka goes a bit deep, and as a result there, Rhodes will be side by side. And now can McKinsey come on through as they make the way down towards turn number 2. Shepka's going to have to defend here, but I think McKinsey's going to have to run around the outside, and Shepka backs out as they make the way into turn number 2. And Shepka there with an uncharacteristic error, making himself lose 2 places in the process. And now will Robert Abrams look at this for inspiration as they head through turn number 3 and up towards 4? Well, I definitely think Abrams here will now know that Yellow Flag Motorsports can be on the charge. It wasn't just about qualifying, it'll also be about the race for them, and they'll need to deliver on it as they make the way up towards turn number 5. As he heads on through here, we look back to James Logsdon, who after a very difficult start, one of the slowest starts of any driver here in terms of losing places, losing 4 places off the line. The only driver who lost more places by comparison was Jacob Wally, who dropped down and was 11 positions. In fact, let me correct myself there, Kurt Smith lost 7 positions at the start, so he's had an absolute dire start to his race, but he's trying to recover as soon as possible. But as they make the way on through, and that's overall positions lost, we should point out. But James Logsdon here trying to find his way past Achitella and Vance, but Vance right now really just digging his teeth in and becoming an immovable object as they make the way into turn number 11 once more, coming on through the right-hander, and Logsdon I think having to back off and know just how much space he needs to give, as meanwhile Kurt Smith, well, this time he may have the run versus Statzer, but Statzer covers him off there as they make the way into turn number 12, but Smith's going to hold it around the outside, turns in but finds Statzer again, just putting his car in the place he doesn't want it to be in. And as they make the way out to 12 and into 13, Smith once again thwarted. Meanwhile, Abrams battling with Shepka here. They've been battling a little bit earlier on in the lap, and now Shepka falls back behind Abrams as they come out of turn number 14 onto the next lap, and Robert Abrams moves up into P9, and Shepka losing out dearly here and seemingly just off the pace after 1 error into turn number 1. He's going to take another look in the return move to turn 1 this time around, looking to go hot on the brakes here, all in, and we can see, well, he's just not going to have enough of a threat versus Abrams then. Abrams just simply saying, yes, I'll give you the space, but I've also got the momentum around the outside. Meanwhile, behind, Achitella has found his way past Vance, and now can Logsdon do the same versus the Delta driver? James Vance on the inside here, covers off the Logsdon in the charge to turn number 2. Further behind, Eric Statzer and Kurt Smith still battling for what is P16 as Smith goes all in on the inside, and Stats there looks at the cutback, but in the end as he goes for the cutback he finds that Smith is able to get the car parked on the inside, and a beautiful move there from Kurt Smith for P4 in class, P16 overall. Well, there, to be fair, it may not sound like much in terms of what they're battling for overall positions, but it's critical to their championship campaigns, as meanwhile Jacob Wally is now under pressure from Jerome Bajulas as they make the way out of turn number 5 and up towards 6, and Bajulas looking for the move, he can't quite find it, as meanwhile we look to John Hinman, who's had a spin coming out of turn number 2, and well, he's rejoined there, but an early spin just going a little bit wide, as you can see by the grass tyre marks, as meanwhile he gets himself back up to speed in the last of the running positions, P20. But as we look back up to Justin Rhodes here, P7 for breakfast for dinner, now under further pressure from Logan McKinsey, and when McKinsey takes a swing to the inside, will he have it on the brakes here? It's Elantra versus Elantra, but no way through at the moment. He has to back out as they come through turn number 12 and up towards 13 they go. Meanwhile, we look from them to a little bit further back in the run of corners here in James Logsdon, who we ride on board with, trying to find his way past James Vance, and will Vance having lost places to Adjutant and Bagilas quite recently. Now can Logsdon also find his way on through, or will he have to stay behind? Well, if he doesn't get it here into the final corner, I think he'll be very confident if he nails the exit here that he can have a run into turn number 1, as Bagilas has found his way past Wally further up the road. But as they make their way down towards turn 1 here in the draft, we can see Vance there with the Audi straight line speed supremacy, just able to get that initial run out the corner. But now the draft really starts to apply as they get to the halfway point of the straight. Now into the final third, it's a battle on the brakes, and Logsdon there thinks about swinging to the inside under trail braking, but Vance outbrakes himself. Logsdon gets the run out the corner, and they'll be side by side in the run to 2. But Vance quickly has the inside line here, so Logsdon's going to be made to go all the way around the houses. Can he outbrake Vance, or will he simply look for the cutback, or will he just go too wide? He goes all the way around the outside. Vance defends hard here, but Logsdon will have the run on the inside into 3. Side by side they come on through, and Vance is still there. Runs a little bit wide, however, but as they head up the hill, it's Audi on the inside, Elantra on the outside. Logsdon now looking to go round the outside into 4. Well, that's a brave move. He goes through it, but in the end he gets Vance to go deep, and Logsdon moves up into P14 as now Vance falling off the circuit. I think James Vance off track and has to jump to the pits. I'm not sure there's an issue with the car as a result of that, but James Vance has had to be towed to the pits, and whether there's more to it than meets the eye in terms of that runoff there, we're not 100% certain, but I believe that may be Vance out for the time being, as we've also had another spin from Hinman at turn number 2, and Hinman's had to be towed to the pits as well. But meanwhile, as we look from them and the back of the field towards the front of the field once again, David Bauer here with pressure from Hendricks, and Hendricks on the inside. He gets cut off there in terms of the nose a little bit, and in fact we have had Hinman return to the circuit, so that was a little bit of a connection issue as we're to understand it from Hinman, as we are here in the Fedorowski's also having a slight issue. As the drives make the way on around still, plenty of racing to go, and Bauer will holding off the charge from Hendricks and also allows on for now. Meanwhile, Robert Abrams behind. We get some past Logan McKenzie, and I think McKenzie, they're going a bit deep into the final corner to let his teammate go. But it's 3 wide in the run down towards turn 1. It's going to be McKenzie on the right. It's going to be Rhodes on the centre. And we thought Shepka was going to be on the left, but Shepka's backed out of it for the time being. I think he doesn't want the 3 wide right now. And as they head down into turn 1, Rhodes defends here in the battle for P8. Delta leader, of course. But as he makes his way out to the opening corner, you can see McKenzie literally left, right and centre on the road. Shepka as well, trying to find a way past McKenzie. But as McKenzie covers him off, he has to back out once again as they come on down through turn number 2. And as they make their way through the left-hander here, where you can see Rhodes goes a little bit deep, but he just about gets the car stopped in time and back onto the racing line to make sure McKenzie cannot capitalise on the error from the Delta driver. But heading up the hill, well, McKenzie right now between a rock and a hard place. He's got the rock of Rhodes ahead and the hard place with Shepka behind. As they come through turn number 4, well, Rhodes is going to do everything in his power here to really frustrate McKenzie and push him backwards. For as we run him with the gearbox, he goes deep, and as they come out the corner, well, they make their way out of 5, and it was a short-lived moment on the gearbox, but now it's side by side into the chicane. Shepka looks up the inside. Rhodes forces the issue on the outside there, but in the end it's made to go deep, and as a result loses the place to McKenzie. And now Shepka looks up the inside here, and as the Torxner racing driver takes the tight line into turn number 8, through 9 they go, but he's going left high and dry on the outside line, and now Rhodes holds off the Honda driver as they make the way to the left-hander at turn 10 into 11. But it's definitely right now all score and war for Shepka versus Rhodes as they make the way through 11 and down towards 12. The two drivers here giving one another no space whatsoever unless it's the minimum permitted, and well, they both want to go for position as much as humanly possible. Meanwhile, further up the road, David Bauer has got ahead of Hendricks at the time being in the battle for P4, though Hendricks did get ahead in the run to turn number 13 as we're to understand it. These two right now exchanging P4 as if it's going out of style, and as they make the way across the timeline, which Bauer ahead at the moment, but now it's a long run down towards turn number 1. But the thing that the Breakfast for Dinner driver does have up his sleeve is that Elantra is very strong on the straights, almost as strong as the Audi. And as they make their way into the braking zone here, the little Veloster that Kurt's going to dive on the inside. Look on the brakes there, and of course better brakes on the Veloster by comparison, and Hendricks gets the place for now. But Bauer now cuts back to the outside here in the run to turn number 2, but it's going to be about whether he tries to sell a dummy on the outside and goes to the undercut, or whether he commits all the way round. He's going to go for the last batter here, and Hendricks covers it off nicely as they make the way through to and into 3. Bauer has to back out for the time being, but John Lauzon looks at this with Beaver Buzz energy and thinks, okay, just keep fighting, guys, take the life out your tyres. I'll come into this battle a little bit later on when the time's right. And we do have confirmation, ladies and gentlemen, we have had the retirement of James Vance due to technical issues on the car when he went wide at turn number 4. I think hitting the depression beyond the exit curbing, and that damaged the suspension enough to cause them to have to tow the car to the pits. So an unfortunate early retirement from James Vance on his debut. A great debut from Vance, but not to be today in terms of the run of form. But meanwhile, we continue to watch this fight inside the top 5, and John Lauzon, the one driver in the trio here of Hendricks, Bauer, Lauzon, that's outside of the top 5. He wants to sternly get inside the top 5 positions, but can he find a way through it? Not at the moment, but he'll wait to do so. Meanwhile, further back here in the battle for P9 through to P, what is gradually becoming P13. You see Shepka goes the outside line for 10. He's got Vagilas diving on his inside here, but as they make the way through 11, well, now Rhodes there with Shepka cuts into the inside into 11, and Shepka finds a way through. But now you can see here Rhodes has got Vagilas on his inside, and Vagilas backs out there. Shepka breaks early. Rhodes tries to go around the outside into 12. They'll be battling all the way into turn 13. Rhodes on the inside once again. Shepka made to leave the door open as they go 3 wide temporarily. Vagilas gets on the inside there versus Shepka. Shepka can't get the throttle down, and now he'll have Wally trying to make the move on the outside into 14, and Shepka being bullied here effectively, just trying to find one place, but in the end being made to lose 2 places, and now at risk of losing another 2 places as a result as they make the way across the timeline onto their 9th tour of the circuit under race conditions. And now Jacob Wally all over the back of the Honda drive, giving him a little tap on the rear end in order to push him along, and I think the privateer wants Shepka to get back into that fight in order to try and open up further doors up the road. I think Wally at this point may have to start looking for a move on the Talksteer Racing driver. But as they make the way out of 1 and down towards 2, you can see this long line of cars tucked in behind Justin Rhodes. And well, the big question of course is Rhodes holding everyone up here? Is he just holding up one driver in the form of Jerome Bajulas, and then everybody else is gradually falling their way into this fight? That's the question that we'll find the answer out for soon, as if we do see Bajulas trying to make the pass and get it done, then we'll have to wait and see what the results or the consequences will be as they make the way into turn at number 4. But right now, all 7 drivers in a long run from P9 through to P14, all staying together, and as they come through the right-hander at the moment, oh goodness me, and Rhodes off there, just as we have seen his praises, goes deep at turn number 5 and goes wide and off circuit, and well, that's going to drop him all the way down the order, misses breaking point by the looks of things and what I'm hearing in my right ear cup at the moment as they make the way through the chicane. Kurt Smith behind now looks at this, I think thinks to himself, right, I've cleared Statzer, had to battle hard for that, and now I can go after Rhodes and potentially get myself ahead of the championship leader. Meanwhile, for Delta leader Jacob Wally, well, he's back into the lead of the class here after a difficult start to his race, but I think he'll be absolutely pleased as punch in the fact that on his debut he is leading in the Delta class, and he's just 1 place outside the overall top 10, which is great on his debut, of course, and that's what you want for a debutant, to be right up there in the fight, because then you really get the thick of feeling what it's like to race amongst the Alphas and the Deltas. But as he comes through turn number 13 right now, can he hold on to the position? That will be the question, because you can imagine that Rhodes will be looking to close up as soon as possible, because Rhodes is right now only 3 seconds down the road by comparison, heading to turn number 14 as we speak. Meanwhile, we look from the back of the field, or the middle of the field as well, to the very front of the field, and here is James Carr, who leads the way for breakfast for dinner and continues to hold a noticeable advantage, having just gone purple on that previous lap with 55.94, the fastest lap of anybody by a margin of what is 3 tenths over the previous best lap from Wojciech Swierdorich of a 56.25, and right now holding a 1.8 second advantage over the second place driver. But these two are clearly breaking away from the rest of the field, with Franz Washing in P3 also in a bit of a world of his own. And then it is the battle for P4 between Hendricks, Bauer and Lauzon, which is the next run. And also you can see there that Robert Abrams It's really moved into the fight here, and that actually makes me wonder with regards to Yellow Flag Motorsports whether they came here on a race setup today, because in qualifying they were nowhere to be seen, and that's not to be disrespectful, they just is the truth. In qualifying we'd expect at least one of their drivers to be right up there in the top 10, but to see all three outside the top 10, that does not happen with Yellow Flag Motorsports. But now in the race they are absolutely flying, and I think that is a sign that the setup they brought to the table has been so race orientated, and they've focused on delivering under those hot race conditions. As you see, John Lauzon here under a bit of pressure now from Abrams. They make the way through the technical sequence of corners, just going into 11, as we speak, and Lauzon taking a bit of a bad run through 9, taking a bit too much apex curve, and the car actually dropping severely off of the curbing, and we saw him lose a lot of momentum, and Abrams looks to move here into turn 12, can't quite find it, but as we ride on board the gearbox here of the Canadian from Beaver Buzz of Lauzon, heading up into turn 13, onto the brakes they go, and well, Abrams there deciding to go a little bit deeper to get a bit more a straighter exit out of the corner, and as they make their way up to 14, we can see here Lauzon into the pits, and John Lauzon comes in early here, the first pit stop on the schedule, and well, he's decided with 20 minutes done he's going to go for the undercut, whereas everybody else by comparison will be on a longer stint now. And will Robert Abrams respond to that the next time he comes down? Will anybody look at that and think, you know what, perhaps the undercut is the way to go? Well, John Lauzon thinks it is, but will it work out for him? Time will only tell as our drivers push on. Meanwhile, speaking of pushing on here, we see Jerome Bourgeois continue to push on now in P8 on circuit, effectively P9 if everything returns to the status quo. When we see Lauzon come out the pits, and all these drivers come into the pits at some point of the race, but of course it's anything but simple as that. And as you see, Bourgeois here holding position ahead of Shepka. Well, the Beaver Buzz driver, we were asking the question, was he being held up by what was roads, or was he just having to find his way past roads like everybody else? It seems to be the latter, because he has not broken away from Shepka or Wally, alternatively Atchella and Logston. And right now these drivers are all in quick succession, the 5 of them making their way up the hill, and well, also closing up gradually to McKinsey, and McKinsey on that last lap was 2 tenths slower than the pack behind him. So I think Logan McKinsey at this point might starting to be feeling a little bit of trepidation in the fingertips, in terms of he may have a pack of 5 cars all looking to try and take P7 off of him. But as they make their way out to turn 5 and up towards 6, Shepka just tucked in here, and will now, despite a difficult start to his race, seen him drop 3 places. He's now clearly back in the rhythm and the form. He's getting stuck back into the fight here to be inside the lower portion of the top 10, and well, who can blame him here? He wants to try and get as many places back as possible, given he was right up then qualifying inside the top 6, but right now finds himself holding on to a place inside the top 10 as they come through turn number 10 into 11. As they make the way on through, we look from where's the battle here for P8 to P16, and that's Adrian Fedorowski from QZ Motorsports, who is chasing after fellow Honda driver but privateer of Eric Statzer as they make the way into turn number 11. And as we ride on board here with the Canadian driver, you can see Statzer goes a bit deep, coming out of 11, making their way down towards the right-angled right-hander at 12, onto the brakes. We see a purple lap there set by James Carr, 55.827. Carr is still flying as Logan McKinsey comes into the pit lane, and well, McKinsey definitely responding to Lauzon, making the way into the pit lane on the previous lap. So we are seeing some early pit stops for some drivers who want to gamble on the undercut. Will we see anything from our deltas here? No such thing, as Fedorowski falls a little bit further back from Statzer after a good run through the second sector, backing off through sector 3, and now making their way onto the timeline to go once again. As they make the way on through, 22 minutes complete at the moment. We've still got 38 minutes plus the final lap to go, so we're by far from over at this time. And as they charge it down towards turn number 1 here, the 2 Delta drivers battling for P4 in the Delta class, and it is Eric Statzer holding on to the aforementioned position, Adrian Fedorowski the challenger. We look back to Mark Darnell here, who makes his way across the timeline, currently running P6 in the Delta class, P18 overall. He is the best part of 1.5 minutes over John Hinman ahead as he makes his way down towards turn number 1 here, and Mark Darnell not quite on the pace of his peers around him, but still enjoying the racing all the same and building up the pace and momentum with every lap turned. But as we look from Darnell up towards what is David Bauer here, David Bauer right now heading on through the chicane and falling off the back of Hendricks, and interestingly having a poor run through the chicane this time. It's cost him a second as they make the way into turn number 9, and will Bauer and Abrams here both in the Elantra as they head into turn 10, and it's going to be about who can get that front end turned in better than the other with the constant direction change, the serpentine sequence if you will, of turns 8 through to 11. And will Bauer definitely under the cosh right now in terms of that pressure as they make their way into the braking zone, and well, the breakfast for dinner driver doing everything he can as the American makes his way out of 12 and in towards 13. As he heads into the braking zone here, Robert Abrams staying as close as humanly possible. Can't seem to find a way on through for now, but again, I wonder if strategy is going to start to take a bigger thought process in the mind of a lot of our drivers here, because of course you've got the freeway battle for P4 between Hendricks, Bauer and Abrams, where all 3 of these drivers are so similar on pace. It takes a mistake to upset the pace difference between them and indeed open it up, and it is the same of course in that battle for P7 on circuit, what we believe is P9 currently in terms of all strategic positions, with Jerome Bourgeois really running wide there at the final corner and having to fight the car to get it back onto circuit before running too wide to pick up an off track. And as they make the way on down, we can see Shepka there flashing his lights to try and say to Bourgeois, return to the racing line, I'm not going to try and make a move on you. That's the traditional driver speak when you're on the racing line behind and you flash your lights. They're trying to say to the driver in front, look, I'm not fighting you, but then again, could it be a dummy? That is something that, of course, the flash of lights is used to do. It can be used to distract as well as provide information. And as they make their way down towards turn number 2 at this point, the 5 drivers here, I wouldn't be surprised if one of them, if not more of them, are thinking about an earlier pit stop than originally planned, because they are all right now running so close on pace. But Vagiles does seem to be the cork in the bottle here, and can anybody pull the cork out and let the champagne flow, if they will, in terms of moving further up the order? Well, that we'll have to wait and see. But Vagiles, at the same time, we've got to give the Buzz Energy driver credit in the fact he's really holding up a huge amount of pressure right now, and doing so admirably as he makes his way through turn number 5 and up towards the chicane once more. Further back, Kurt Smith chasing after Justin Rhodes, and Smith, to be fair, really hounding the back of Rhodes to Peter in the Delta class, P12 overall, as they make the way in towards the chicane. And we ride on board here with Smith from Not Last Motorsports as he makes his way through 7 and up towards turn number 8. Now, what's interesting, of course, here is the Elantra being the one-lap pace car versus the Veloster that's the jack of all trades, master of none. We're really starting to see the Veloster come into its own in the race, and also in what is this circuit as a whole. We saw in qualifying the Veloster's quite strong, not quite able to take the pole position in the end that we saw was exchanged, with James Carr taking that pole position in the end in the Elantra. But the Veloster's up there inside the top 6, and now Kurt Smith really trying to make a statement here versus Rhodes. And given Rhodes is off track earlier on, I wonder if that's burned a little bit of life out of the front tyres, more than what he thought would be taken out the car in these early stages of the race. We're not even quite at the halfway point. We've still got about 4 minutes to go before we get to the halfway stage. But of course, every little bit of tyre wear matters as we go deeper and deeper into the racing at the Hungaroring circuit in Hungaroring of Budapest. But as we look from these guys to a little bit further up the road, we can see here in the battle for P5, it's Bauer versus Abrams, and Abrams was ahead for a brief moment but went deep into turn 1, and now Abrams has dropped back behind as Bauer makes the return move. And well, in the run to the top 5, the number 35 driver at the moment really trying to push on here, but I think the problem is with the amount of battling they're going through, they are gifting Hendricks enough gap in order to feel a bit more safe as the Hasselhoff's Motorsport driver takes the lead view in our camera, and then Bauer follows suit. And you see that gap has already opened up to in excess of a second, and every little bit of battling helps for Hendricks. So you see there, Robert Abrams with an absolutely classic run to the inside into turn number 5. They're just carrying all the momentum out of 4 and gets ahead. And well, Robert Abrams there absolutely as cool as a cucumber and simply sees the space and goes for it. And I don't think Bauer even knows what hit him there, and I think now he's going to have to give himself a reality check and make the way back up to speed as soon as possible. And that is saying something, because Bauer there was defending so well and hard, and then Abrams at a place you just do not go for a move typically into turn number 5. He finds it out of left field and gets it done as they make the way down towards turn number 12 once more. Now the telling sign will be, will Abrams get the run out of 13 and 14 that he needs in order to keep Bauer behind, or will things invert once more as they get to turn number 1? Well, the gap seems to be opening here as Bauer falls back to 6/10 off as they make their way through 13, and perhaps Bauer might be considering an early pit stop now, given that the fight has been taken away. No, he does not. In fact, he stays behind and opts to stay on circuit as they make the way through turn number 14, and as they come onto the start-finish straight. Well, now, of course, perhaps Bauer may also be thinking, can Abrams pull us both back up to Hendricks once again? And that might be a full process here after everything that happened as they make their way down towards turn number 1. But it seems as though the trio here absolutely inseparable by half a second apiece as they head into the braking zone. As they come on through, one driver who has gone into the pits, so I look out of my commentary booth window, is Matt Shepka. He's come on in, and that's released before drivers of Pajulas, Wally Acatello and also Logston to battle hard in the run for what is P7 on circuit. But of course, we're wondering where the likes of John Lauzon will fit into the sequence. In fact, John Lauzon's into the pits again. Well, it may be the case that John Lauzon's first pit stop was a drive-through penalty of some description, or perhaps he's now coming in for a drive-through penalty. We will try and get that confirmed as soon as possible. In fact, John Lauzon, he's definitely in the pit lane. We can confirm that at the moment, but as they make the way on down here, that is not the way that Lauzon has wanted it to go whatsoever, and I think that might have been a drive-through, although we're not 100% sure. I think we might have actually had a glitch on our time screen. To me, on Logan McKenzie is definitely into the pit lane. We can confirm that, and I believe there's also some connectivity issues for Logan McKenzie as he makes his way on around, but we will keep you updated of any penalties if and as they arise. But I think we have just had a small glitch in our time tag, so I don't think Lauzon has in fact had a drive-through penalty at all. In fact, he may have only just had the one pit stop so far, and hopefully that'll be the only one he's going to have over the course of the racing. As we continue to watch the battle for P4 here, well, since making this move on Bauer, Abrams has really closed up to the back of Hendricks, and as we ride on board the gearbox here of the Hassholz Motorsports Veloster driver running in P4, you can definitely see Abrams now coming alive, and I wonder if his pit stop is upcoming within the next 10 minutes, because normally when a driver's pushing this hard, it's because they've got a pit stop coming up and they want to put in effectively qualifying laps to try and gain a bit more race time, but also perhaps gain 1 or 2 more positions before they come on in and take some time out of the driver in front of them as they make their way down the start-finish straight. Now we'll see Abrams close up quite dramatically here as they make their way up through the gearboxes down towards turn number 1, but Abrams not that close in actuality as he sits 3/10 off and I think backs off in the end and just lets the car glide into the apex as they make their way through 1 and up towards 2. Meanwhile, further behind, as we see them make their way through the corner, we can see here to the battle for what is at P7. Jerome Bagelas leads at the foreground of the camera. Meanwhile, behind Jacob Wally and also Achatella, both setting personal bests. In fact, James Logsdon doing so as well here. So I think the 3 drivers behind Bagelas all now starting to get an itch, which is to push a little bit harder. And Bagelas actually up in the tempo as well. You can see he's opened up a bit of a gap to Wally behind him. But as they make their way down into turn number 2, nobody looking at a move, but looking at a move further back, it's Smith on the inside of Rhodes here, and this will be for P2 in the Delta class, and they make their way through turn 2. Rhodes leaves the door open, but he's on the outside and gets the move back into turn number 3. But Kurt Smith and Not Lost Motorsports definitely showing the breakfast for dinner driver that he is looking for a move, and that's the first sign of it as they make their way out towards turn number 4. They'll go for it if the opportunity arises, and Justin Rhodes now I think might have to give way to the thought of chasing down Wally for the time being and instead focus on his position and holding on to it. As meanwhile, Robert Abrams has found his way ahead of Hendricks coming out of what was turn number 9, and we're not quite sure how the move materialised, but it has happened, and the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver has got up a position as Hendricks now looks to try and come back at him in the run to turn number 12, but doesn't make it there. He's still got half the race to go as we make our way into the second half an hour, and still plenty of opportunities, and of course the strategy may all factor into this. Hendricks may have given up for all we know in terms of just lifting off to save himself some fuel, and maybe he'll be considering coming into the pit soon, but no sign of that happening on this lap as he stays on out. Indeed, Bauer does the same behind, but meanwhile at the front of the field here and continuing to go faster and faster with every lap. James Carr now goes fastest of everybody again with a 55.73. To put that in perspective, that was 3/10 faster than Swierdorich on that previous lap, who set a 56.04. And where is Swierdorich? Well, here he is, the privateer from Poland in P2 in the Audi RS3. And well, so close to pole position in qualifying, but in the end being pipped, and right now Carr is absolutely trying to run this one off into the distance and leaves Swierdorich to P2, and Francois Schink behind in P3, also being left behind to a degree as they make their way through the first 3 corners of the circuit up towards turn number 4. Meanwhile, as they head on up the hill, we do look from them back to Jacob Wally here, who is now trying to put some pressure onto Jerome Bagelas as he looks at a move here, does the Delta rookie as they come through turn number 2. We ride on board with Wally the privateer as he looks to go round the outside into 3, can't quite find it, but he gets Bagelas to go a little bit deep. That's going to be close here as he has to whip the car out towards turn number 4 on the outside, and as they head up the hill, Bagelas is going to defend here, but Wally gets it done. He makes Bagelas have to brake early, and as they come through 4 into 5, Jacob Wally moves up into P7 on track. We believe it's P9 based on strategy, but as they come out of turn number 5, one thing is very clear: the 827 driver is taking nothing in reserve. He is putting it all out of circuit in the race as much as in qualifying, and he is absolutely flying right now as they make the way into turn number 8 and 9. But as they come on through, now Achatella will look at that, and I think surely he's got to take some inspiration, the Yellow Flag Motorsports driver, and the same for Logsdon behind, in thinking, look, we can also make the move, given now that Wally has shown it's possible. But as they make the way through turn number 11, of course, catching is one thing, passing is another, and at the Hungaroring, we've seen that time and time again, and Bagelas looks at a return mover into 12. Wally leaves the door open there, and Bagelas makes it count, and he makes it stick as they head up into 13. As they come through the left hand here, again, when will we see one of these 4 decide to come into the pit and break the pack open? Well, Bagelas right now does not come in, neither does Wally. Achatella does make the way in. Logsdon stays on out, so Achatella heads on through into the pit lane, and I think that might be a very smart choice down. I think now we may see a reaction from Bagelas, Wally or Logsdon on the next lap, because something's got to break in the mould there. As meanwhile, speaking of outbreaking himself slightly into turn number 13, Adrian Fedorowski in the battle for P13 on circuit between himself and Eric Statzer. Statzer ahead of him, the privateer, ahead of the QZ Motorsports driver. They're battling for P4 in class crossing the Delta glass as they make the way out of the final corner and on to the next lap. But as they come charging down towards turn number 1, still plenty of time for Federowski to look for the move here, but these two have been inseparable in terms of lap time and been running within half a second of one another for the best part of the last 20 minutes as they head into turn 1 once again. Behind them, meanwhile, we have Shepka, who is now on the charge here, having made his one and only pit stop for today, or his planned pit stop we should say, and as he comes to return and won the Torque Racing driver back out ahead of Achatella, and you can see here how the battling and being stuck behind Bajulaz has cost Achatella quite significantly, now sitting 2.5 seconds behind Shepka as they make the way in towards turn number 2. So Shepka may just gain from all of this as Darnell sets a personal best coming across the timeline there, 59.862, and Darnell gradually picking up some pace, albeit currently about 2 seconds off of the average pace of his class peers ahead of him, but still putting in the laps and gradually gaining time on circuit, and that's what it's all about. But as he comes roaring on through, we unfortunately can confirm, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a retirement. We've had 2 more retirements in addition to James Advance. We've had the retirement of Logan McKinsey and also the retirement of John Lauzon. Well, whatever that technical issue we saw on our screen earlier on in terms of the timing tag, it has proven to be a retirement from the Beaver Buzz Energy driver and the retirement from McKinsey. Very unfortunate for the pair of them. So that's 3 retirees now out of 20 competitors here today at the Hungaroring circuit, but still plenty of racing to come. In a difficult day for Lauzon, McKinsey and Vance. But as we see Bajulaz peeling off into the pit lane, we see Wally and also Logston staying out here, and I think they both feel they can go even longer, and they may be wanting to try and overcut here on Bajulaz. But the problem will be if they go this long, given the amount of time they spent behind Bajulaz, surely going to lose out even more. As you see there in the rear of the picture, that was Justin Rhodes coming out the final corner, and of course Justin Rhodes right now, well, he is clear of Smith, who's come into the pit lane, so he's going to be given some breathing room as the Breakfast for Dinner drive to try and put in some more laps. But the Not Last Motorsports driver as well will be thinking that by pitting early he can potentially undercut Rhodes in terms of strategy as they make the way on around. It's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top in the paradigm shift of overcut versus undercut. But as the Breakfast for Dinner driver here clearly goes for the undercut on his the overcut on his rival, we should say, well, Rhodes will have all the track in the world to play with. Can he put in the times that matter most as he makes his way out of 2 and almost runs off circuit there and hesitating to get on the front? You could see they'll wobble on the rear right tyre as he makes his way through 3 and up towards 4. But as he heads on up the hill, we look from him up the field towards P5 here in the form of Mika Hendricks. The Hassel's Motorsports driver continues to try and chase down Abrams, who is actually breaking away. And Robert Abrams has opened up a gap of almost 2 seconds over Hendricks over the last 5 laps. Well, in terms of lap times, well, on that previous lap, Abrams half a second almost faster than Hendricks. And I think Abrams really now trying to get the job done. But I think Hendricks in return here may just be simply coasting it around and looking to try and save some fuel, because we've seen how much pace is under the fingertips of the Hassel's Motorsports Veloster driver. But can he find a way to jump back ahead of Abrams on strategy, or will he be falling more and more into the clutches of David Bowell? None of them decide to pit. They all opt to stay out on circuit once more, as meanwhile the race leaders do the same. James Carr goes even faster up the front of the field on a 55.50 that time around, now opening his lead over Wojciech Swierdowicz to a margin of over 5.1 seconds almost as they headed into turn number 2. That meanwhile, as we look from what is the battle here for P5 to behind between James Logston and also Jacob Wally there, and as they make the way out of the final corner and down towards another lap, nothing between them. Logston stays tucked in behind, and the privateer from Team Bearpo, I think, looking to try and find a way in order to jump ahead of Wally based on strategy now, because he does not seem to have enough in the car to get it done on circuit. Unless Wally makes an error, the gap stays at 3.5 tenths to 4 tenths depending on corner and portion of circuit as they make their way up towards turn at number 2. And of course now we are in a little bit of a calm before the storm. A lot of the battles of the close fighting we saw earlier on have subsided, but mostly due to strategy and drivers deciding to peel onto the pits to try and break away or find a way around their opponent in terms of undercut versus overcut. But we'll have to see when it all comes together what drama lies in wait. But I suspect the lead pit stops in terms of our top 6 who have yet to pit, or indeed our top 11 who've yet to pit, all from P1 through to P11 have yet to come into the pits. Their scheduled stop, they will be coming in within the next 10 minutes. I don't see anybody taking the car all the way to the 50th minute of racing, given these fuel tanks last a long time but not that long. Again, we could be proven wrong, but meanwhile not thinking about the fuel at the moment. I think thinking more about battling for that P10 position on circuit. It is Adrian Fedorowski here who stays very close to the back of Statzer as they make their way into turn 5, and Statzer goes defensive there into the hairpin, and as they make the way through the long right hand and now up towards the chicane, We ride on board it with the QC Motorsports driver Fedorowski as he heads on to the anchors here for 6 and 7. He can't quite get close enough here to continue that pressure, but Jerome Bajulas behind, who has pitted. Well, I can tell you he's been 2 attempts in this battle, and Bajulas will not be pleased that he's walked right out into the minefield of battling with 2 Deltas, and he'll want to come on through. The 2 Deltas will not be concerned about whether Bajulas is on his second stint or not. They'll only be focusing on one thing, and that is their battle. But as they both come through turn number 11 and down towards 12, running a bit deep, then Bajulas looks up the inside of Fedorowski, who's going to have to force the issue. Is Bajulas, as you see, the Beaver Buzz Energy Hyundai Elantra goes up the inside, gets the move done there, and Fedorowski, and does not lose too much time, but will have definitely lost quite a bit of time in the run through the second sector. And as they make the way through turn number 13, well, can Bajulas get the run done here? In fact, he's going to be given the grace, which is that Statzer comes into the pit. So does James Logston a bit further up the road as I look out my commentary booth window, and Jerome Bajulas there does lose some time, but not as much as he potentially could have. He made the most important pass, which was to get past Fedorowski, who stayed out on circuit, as now Bajulas heads down towards turn 1. But look at this, James Logston comes out the pit lane, and Logston may have got the jump here on Bajulas. It's only taken 1 lap of traffic, but then again, has he got enough into 1? And no, Bajulas just about outbrakes Logston into the corner there, and I think Logston could have been a bit more aggressive on the braking, but I think he didn't know how far he could go on the brakes, and in the end, Bajulas gets the jump and moves back into P9 on circuit, and that is a critical moment in Jerome Bajulas' race, because he has jumped ahead of Logston. He's got the car all fired up once again, and now he's got to be looking to do the same versus Wally as they make the way up the hill. As they head into turn number 4 here, of course, it's all to play for between them, but Logston there coming out behind, and Shepka coming out in P12, a long way further back by comparison. And to give you an idea of where Shepka is, here he is. He has fallen behind Logston, but as he has lost out the most, well, in fact, not quite lost out the most, we should say. That is Connor Achatella, who is behind Shepka, who's lost out the most in all of this by going for the undercut early on. But the undercut seemingly not working out here for drivers as they make the way on through. We've still got time to go, of course, plenty of laps still to be turned, and mistakes can still happen, but it does look as though it is the overcut which is the optimum approach here for driving around the Hungaroring circuit. But as we look from Achatella behind Woody Shepka all the way back up to Bajulas here, you see Bajulas staying clear right now of Logston into the braking zone for turn number 12, and well, Logston there missing out on a major opportunity, but literally only a couple of meters being the difference in the end, and Bajulas making that difference count as they head through turn number 13. But still no pit stops for our race leaders at the moment. They continue the way on around, and with your race leaders, we look to him here is James Carr, who continues to go faster and faster with every lap as the fuel continues to be drained out of the machine. Now at 55.41 is the bar for the fastest lap of the race, and that is 4 tenths faster than the previous lap of Swierdowicz, who has previously set his fastest lap of 55.68. So James Carr will be taking the fastest lap bonus point at this rate of knots by almost 3 tenths of a second over Swierdowicz as he makes his way through turn 11 and down towards 12. But James Carr just seemingly in a world of his own, as we do see here Wojciech Swierdowicz making his way in towards turn number 12 and just not able to respond at this point in terms of that pace advantage that James Carr seems to be bringing to the table. But as they head into turn number 13, we look from Swierdowicz to Francois Schink here, who in return running in that 3rd place at the moment, falling further and further away from the top 2, but still managing his pace, albeit Robert Abrams is gradually closing to Schink, it should be pointed out. On the last lap, he took a whole half a second out of Schink, and as they make their way towards the end of this lap, what will it be this time around? As we hear that Mark Darnell is into the pits for his mandatory pit stop, but as they make the way on around here, Robert Abrams flows on through. Hendricks comes on in to take his pit stop, and Robert Abrams comes to the time in line. Well, Schink was a 56.350, Abrams a 55.931. Abrams taking another 4 attempts out of Schink. Could we see a battle for P3 on the cards right towards the end of this race? What the rate of knots that Abrams is moving, we would see the battle unfold, and approximately with 3 to 4 laps to go, presuming their pit stops are identical in time, and Robert Abrams continues to take a minimum of 4 attempts out a lap as they make their way down towards turn number 2. But as they come on through, David Bauer falling further and further back off of Abrams. I think David Bauer, given how much he put in the car in terms of pace earlier on, he has taken some life out of the tyres, and since being passed by Abrams, has not really recovered from being passed by him in terms of being able to charge back after Abrams. But then again, with Hendricks coming into the pits, that may galvanise David Bauer now to push a little bit, and perhaps he'll be coming in with the next couple of laps. Meanwhile, we see Adrian Fedorowski here yet to pit, chasing after Shepka as they make the way down towards turn number 1. Shepka recently made the pass to Fedorowski, we should point out, and well, with Fedorowski yet to take his pit stop, I don't think it's going to be worth him battling too hard with Shepka, and also Achitella behind, for the simple reason his biggest worry or conundrum will be, can he finish ahead of Eric Statzer and take that P4 in the Delta class here today, as Statzer has already served his pit stop and is making his way up towards the timeline as we currently speak, and you can see that on the circuit map in the top right corner of your screen. But as they come charging on down and around, the QZ Motorsports driver here finds himself between the two Alpha drivers who've already pitted, and I think he needs to navigate this one with strategic smarts rather than blunt force defence. He makes his way up the hill as he heads in towards turn number 4. One driver who's already cleared for him through turn number 5 right now, Jerome Virgil, the Beaver Buzz Energy driver, with Logston behind here. And Logston not letting go, despite the fact he missed out on trying to get the overcut on Bajula, as it was only by a fraction of a second as they make the way through the chicane and up towards turn number 8. Logston there like a bad rash, and he wants to be there all the way through to the end. But meanwhile, it is pit stop season as Francois Schinck comes into the pits from P3, Robert Abrams comes in from P4, and David Bauer comes in from P5. Now, where will Hendricks filter into all of this? Well, we look for Hendricks, and here is Hendricks making the way on around, albeit obscured a little bit there by the bushes, but now we can see them in daylight, and the Hassels Motorsports driver comes through the final corner. Meanwhile, Schinck is already leaving the pit lane, so Schinck will come to be back in P3. Abrams is starting to leave his pit box, so Hendricks heading down towards turn number 1, and I think Robert Abrams is clearly ahead. In fact, he is. He's a long way ahead as he heads into the braking zone for turn number 1. That is Jacob Wally ahead, and Wally is yet to pit. But meanwhile, Robert Abrams comes out by a margin there of 3.2 seconds over Hendricks, and that gap has actually opened up since we saw Hendricks come into the pit lane. Well, Robert Abrams absolutely delivering on his in-laps, and now Hendricks has got it all to do, as meanwhile David Bauer has closed up a little bit to Hendricks, or has he? Well, no, the gap is in fact about the same since the start of the pit stops of the trio, so David Bauer not really making any gains in the pit stop window. Meanwhile, Hendricks not gaining either. It's the story of Robert Abrams gaining and flying high. Meanwhile, Justin Rhodes here up the inside of Kurt Smith, as Smith has recently made his way down towards turn 1 in this battle, and well, Rhodes now continuing to fight for P2 in the Delta class, and Smith really now trying to get back at his rival here, but Kurt Smith on fire today, and Rhodes by comparison looking a little bit vulnerable, it must be said, as they come charging through turn 3 and up towards 4, because if Smith can put this pressure on right now, Jacob Wally leading the way in the Delta class, albeit P4 having not yet pitted, but we expect him to come out well clear of this battle between Rhodes and Smith. He's definitely looking to be a big contender later on in the season, as I try to make the way through turn 4 and up towards 5 here on camera. But as Rhodes holds off Smith for the time being, we look to our race leader in the pit lane. You can see that James Carter at the end of the pit lane with Wojciech Swiderowicz behind him, and the two of them, well, between them there's nothing in it in terms of the pit stops. But as they make the way on down, one thing that will stay certain, we should say, try saying that sibilant multiple times in quick succession, that James Carr really flying on through, and Swiderowicz just not having an answer, as that gap has now opened up to in excess of 6 seconds. But as they head back up to speed coming out of turn number 1, we look here to Jacob Wally, who is yet to pit and almost going to the 50th minute without a pit stop so far, the only driver who is yet to take his mandatory pit stop. And where Jacob Wally is trying to prove a point here, which is that he is definitely a driver to be feared. Well, I think he's made that point multiple times through his actions today, all positive actions, but right now running this long in terms of his opening stint, I think he wants the shortest possible stint in the history of the AlphaTauri Challenge in a feature race here. I do not recall any other circuit where the drivers pitted after what was the 50th minute, so if Wally continues on this race, he's going to be setting a series record technically as he makes his way on down and around. But meanwhile, speaking of making the way down towards another stint, here is John Hinman making the way out the pit lane, the last of our honours in P17 for the privateer, whilst they're a lap down versus Darnell, still carrying on. They have had to make 2 pit stops, in fact, I think due to some damage picked up on the car after a spin earlier on in terms of those tyres being heavily worn. But Hinman is continuing on his way, and to be fair, it's all about finishing, getting some points on the table. Even if you're not the fastest, even if you're not in the competition, every lap turned is invaluable experience, and Hinman proving that point, the privateer, as he heads into turn number 2. As he heads on through the left-hander, we look from him and up to Justin Rhodes, a fellow Delta driver, battling for P12 overall, P2 in the class with Kurt Smith. And you can see Kurt Smith just behind here, and the Not Last Motorsports driver right now really trying to stay close to Rhodes as they make the way through turn number 5 and up towards 6, but not really close enough to put any pressure on at this time. The gap opened up a little bit compared to where they previously were. The gap previously 4 attempts, now it's doubled to 8 attempts. I think Kurt Smith may be saving it all up for a last charge right at the end, given that these two seem inseparable at the moment, and perhaps hoping that Rhodes will just take a little bit too much out of the tyres in the final few minutes, and that's where Smith can strike in the final 5 minutes. Meanwhile, a battle that is growing here for Jules versus Logsdon, and as we ride on board here with James Logsdon, let's listen in. As they make the way through turn number 13 and up towards 14 they go. It's very interesting, of course, the Logsdon really trying to roll the car in behind Jules under braking to try and get as close as possible. And as they make the way out to 14, again proving that point of running so close to get a nice toe down the start-finish straight. Because within 3 attempts he'll gain a nice toe that'll bring him within 1.5 attempts under braking into turn number 1. As we see here that Wally has come into the pits, has left the pit lane in the 50th minute, so going at pretty much the maximum possible distance that the fuel tank can go. But tucked in behind here, Logsdon behind up for Jules, he cannot find a way at the moment, staying within 3 attempts. Meanwhile, Jacob Wally just coming out 2.5 seconds behind this battle ahead of Shepka, and Jacob Wally definitely in contention now to finish inside the overall top 10 on his debut, and well clear by 8 seconds of Justin Rhodes and Kurt Smith, who continue to fight for the rest of the podium positions in the Delta class as they make the way on around. In the charge up towards turn number 4 here, we can see that Pajulas just ahead of Wally and making the way in towards turn number 5. Onto the brakes they go, and as they do, well, the Beaver Buzz Energy driver here, if he continues to fight with Logsdon, he's going to have a 2-way fight on his hands in terms of trying to keep what is his rival of Wally behind, and also Logsdon there as they creep on him. Meanwhile, Justin Rhodes went off track, he's gone sideways at turn number 4, and that has released Kurt Smith into P2 in the Delta class and P12 overall, and the breakfast for dinner driver, that is really going to put a dent in his aspirations to pull an advantage in the championship lead. If anything, right now this will enable him still to put an advantage over Stanza, but Smith and Wally will definitely gain some ground in terms of championship considerations. This is not the way that Rhodes wants it to go at the Hungaroring at all, as now he finds himself 5.5 seconds off of Kurt Smith, and well, whether there was contact or not, we're not 100% sure because we haven't been able to get a replay of it, but I suspect there may not have been contact. I think Rhodes may have just got it wrong at the very tricky left-hander at turn number 4, but as he makes his way back up to speed, we look here to Pajulas, who continues to try and fend off Logsdon as they make the way out to the final corner and on towards the start finish straight. Still 8.5 minutes to go, and that translates lap time wise into another 5 laps as they head down towards turn number 1, where our race leader James Carr, the best part of what is 50 seconds up the road, and Bajulo's going defensive here as Justin Rhodes enters the pit lane, and say it's not so. I think Rhodes, if that off track amounts to a drive-through penalty, it's going to see him drop potentially behind Federowski and Stanza, depending on how soon they come on around. And as they make the way on through here, continue to focus on this battle between Bajulas and Logsdon. I look out my commentary box window with regards to where we have Justin Rhodes on circuit. In fact, he's made his way down towards the end of the pit lane now. It is a drive-through. Meanwhile, where is Adrian Federowski? Well, here he is. And to put it in perspective, Rhodes is only just about heading to the braking zone for turn 1. So Federowski here, if he sees Rhodes have another off at all, it could give Federowski inspiration to take the final spot on the Delta podium. But as they make the way on around here, we can see that Jacob Wally, meanwhile, under pressure from Shepka as they make the way through turn number 5 and up towards 6, in towards the braking zone for the chicane they go. And I think right now the Delta leader having to look more behind him than in front of him in terms of chasing positions down, more fending off attacks for his position. But still, if he's to hold on to P9 versus the veteran of Shepka, that'll be a huge achievement and definitely a scalp that he can take to his name as they make the way through turn 9 into 10. And into left-right combination they go to conclude the second sector, and as they make the way on through, we can see here just up the road Bajulas versus Logsdon really started to take it up a further notch in terms of how close the two are. As we ride on board and look back from the gearbox of Jerome Bajulas, the Beaver Buzz driver holding off the privateer of Logsdon into turn 13. They roll the way under braking once again into the hairpin, and as they come on out, you can see just how Logsdon able to get the car turned in a bit earlier, more comfortable on going for those deeper entries and earlier power points with regards to coming out of the corner and making his way back up to top speed in the run to the next corner. And now only 2.5 tenths separates them as they gather momentum in the run down towards turn number 1. And in the charge they go here, and as they head down towards the braking zone, Bajulas goes defensive here. Logston's going to look round the outside. Will he try and cut it all the way through? Side by side they go under braking. Logston's going to go all the way round. There's contact between the two of them. A little bit of a rub there, but Bajulas on the inside. Logston holds the outside. It'll make him take the inside line to turn 2. But Bajulas is going to get the better run off the corner. But as they head into 2, he's going to try and brake as late as possible, go for the cutback for 3. But I don't think either's going to materialise. As Logston clears Bajulas, and into turn 3 they go, and James Logston moves up into P7 overall. As they head up the hill, will we see one last counter-attack from Jerome Bajulas in this sequence of corners? I don't think so. I think Bajulas has to tuck in behind and wait, but James Logston finally making the move stick, and well, getting the jump on Shepka, Wally and Achutella in terms of the pits. He couldn't quite get the jump on what is Bajulas, as Bajulas there tries to capitalise on Logston going a bit deep out of turn 5. Looks the inside there, tries to get his nose in, but Logston outbraking his rival and holds on through the chicane to P7. It's not over yet, but this will be a huge move for Logston and definitely enabling him to move a little bit further up the order as they come through turn number 9 into 10 and 11 they go, but looking clean and clear now. Here's the Triple Eight driver as he heads into 11, and can he break away and give himself some breathing room for the final 5 minutes of racing here at the Hungaroring? As meanwhile behind we see in the battle for P9 overall, the privateer of Wally is still holding off when it's Matthew Shepka there as they make the way into turn number 12. But through the right hand they go, and as they make the way in towards turn number 13, well, Shepka will, I think, look to make the move on the final 5 minutes of racing here with 3 more laps of these guys as they come in towards the final corner. And of course the Torque Steer Racing Honda, renowned for its ability to go late on the brakes. The Elantras right now will be feeling a lot of pain on those front tyres by comparison, whereas the Honda will feel quite comfortable on its front tyres due to track temperature and also tyre degradation really coming into an effect. But Shepka just not able to get the run out of the final corner that he wants. Meanwhile, Adrian Fedorowski goes ahead of Justin Rhodes, and Justin Rhodes has had to be towed to the pits for an off-track at what we believe is turn number 11. And well, for Justin Rhodes, with that jump to the pits, it's going to promote Adrian Fedorowski to P13, but more importantly for him, his Delta class position of P3. He'll be on the Delta podium, and well, Eric Statzer right now, who's a bit further back, 11 seconds off, must be wondering what would have been if he'd been able to hold off Adrian Fedorowski in the hunt for what was P4 originally between the two of them. That now takes a greater significance because it is the final spot on the Delta podium of P3. But we can't quite see what exactly has happened to Justin Rhodes, but he has had to be towed, and it is not a happy day for the breakfast for dinner driver Justin Rhodes, and his championship advantage in the Delta class will not be extended anywhere near as much as he would have been hoping it would have been come the end of today's racing going into the Christmas break. But meanwhile we look from P14 up to P5, and well, here is the Haas-Holz Motorsports driver Amika Hendricks as they try to hold off breakfast for dinner's David Bauer in the remainder of this race. And Bauer, who was a good number of seconds behind, 3 seconds behind when they both left the pit lane to complete the strategies, and now David Bauer on the last lap took a whole second out Hendricks. I think Hendricks is struggling here right at the end of this race. The lap times seem to have collapsed by comparison to Hendricks, and Bauer caught up all behind. And as they make the way out of the final corner, well, can the breakfast for dinner driver get the run towards turn number 1 here as they make the way up through the gearbox towards top gear, head down towards the braking zone, and as they make the way on through, you can see Hendricks already going defensive, putting it in the middle of the road to say to Bauer, you're going to have to go around the outside if you want it. Under braking, and well, we'll see Hendricks on the right of the picture very shortly, or will we? No, we will not, as they drag race their way out of the corner and make the way down towards turn number 2, and Bauer getting a better run off the corner compared to Hendricks as they build up through the gears. Onto the brakes he goes, there's a bit of a door rub there, and as they make the way through 2, well, Bauer gets the move done firmly, but now will Hendricks come back in the run from 3 up towards 4? I don't think so at the moment, unless Hendricks can find a run to the inside as Bauer there covers off the inside line initially. They've got to make the way over to the right eventually for turn 4. To be that tight to the inside is going to be tantamount to disaster, but David Bauer gets the move for a top 5 finish done there. Up into P5, the breakfast for dinner driver goes overall and in the Alpha class with 1 more lap after this one on the count as they make the way in to the chicane. But as they make the way on through, Hendricks may try and come back, we reckon, if there is even the slightest mistake from Bauer, given that Hendricks will not give up until till the very end, but I think Hendricks really struggling with front tyre wear as well, and that is just holding him at bay to a degree as the drivers make the way through at turns 9, 10 and 11 in quick succession. But as they make the way out towards the end of Sector 2, we look a little bit further down the order to Shepka here, who continues to chase after Wally as they make the way through what is the chicane and now head up towards turn number 8. And you'll notice that Agitella is creeping closer to this fight as the P11 driver for Yellow Flag Motorsports wants to try and get back into the top 10 and mimic what his peer from his own team of Robert Abrams has been able to do. Can he make it to Yellow Flag Motorsports cars recovering to the top 10 today? Well, with McKinsey having that early retirement, of course they'll want it for the team's championship as well, but whether he can do so or not, it's quite a gap. I think he'll need Shepka and Wally to both battle, alternatively one of them to make a major error at this time. But as they head on through turn 12 and up towards 13, you can count on one thing right now that Wally has not made all day is a critical error, and also Shepka, to be fair, after an early instant, now really back on form as they make the way into the final corner to go on to what for them will be their final lap. It will be 31 laps of racing turned when all's said and done here at the Hungaroring for the leaders, as we can see the white flag waving there. One more lap to go as they head across the timeline. Wally putting in a personal best of 57.0, Shepka 56.6 personal best as well. Agitella by comparison of 57.266. I think it is going to come down between these two. Shepka looks the inside there, trying to go late and trying to get Wally to open the steering up late there in terms of making a dummy move to the inside under braking, but Wally not falling for it, instead just simply keeping his cool. But as they make the way into turn number 2, we have to look from them to our race leader for us. He's only got 2 more corners to go until the checker flag as the clock strikes the hour. Breakfast for dinner's James Carr. We put it on pole in the end by 2 attempts, coming out of nowhere right at the end of the qualifying session when the track was in its prime. And after holding off Wojciech Swierdowicz in the run to turn number 1, he has literally had this one all said and done in the bag. And as he comes through the final corner, he is your winner today in round number 5. It is Breakfast for dinner's James D. Carr who takes the win in the end by almost 8 seconds come the checker flag over Wojciech Swierdowicz, who comes on through the privateer to take P2. A great drive for the Audi RS3 driver, and the top 2 in a world of their own ahead of this man, Francois Schenk, who from Beaver Buzz Energy, to be fair, has been the best of the rest, and in the end will finish 26.5 seconds behind the race winner, but will still take 3rd place on the overall and the Alpha podium in a great drive for Beaver Buzz. It will then be in P4 Robert Abrams, who crosses the line for Yellow Flag Motorsports ahead of David Bauer, who will complete our top 5 in the end. The recovery to P5 after dropping to P6 early on for Breakfast for dinner there in a fantastic drive. Mika Hendricks not quite having enough in the end on the front tyres, has to settle for P6 for Hassholz Motorsports, but great battling from him. And then it'll be James Logston who comes through the final corner to take P7 and what has been a tooth and knuckle fight for P7 between himself, Bajulaz, Wally, Shepka, Agitella, all the way to line, but P7 for the privateer had a drone Bajulaz, P8 for Beaver Buzz. It'll then be Jacob Wally, who on his debut takes the Delta class win, P9 overall for the privateer in a superb drive to victory in class. Matthew Shepka takes P10 ahead of Connor Agitella, P11, best of the rest in terms of outside the top 10. Kurt Smith, P12, P2 in class, and then it'll be shortly from QZ Motorsports, Adrian Fedorowski, who comes through the final couple of corners here in an unexpected but a welcome P3 in class, P13 overall, and the Delta driver here I think could not be happier going into the Christmas break as he comes to the timeline in what has been a great drive from him ahead of Eric Statzer, who will come to the line shortly, but battling to the end versus Eric Statzer and pipping him to the post. But before Statzer can get to the line, we do have John Himman who come across the line, P16, a lap down, and we have already had Mark Darnell finish his race a lap down as well. And then we have Eric Statzer to be the last of our finishers on circuit, P14, Mark Darnell P15, and Justin Rhodes P16 in the end, finishing 3 laps down on the field. But a fantastic race from start to finish, and well, let's take you through those race results, subject to any stewards' inquiries, of course. Well, after 31 laps of racing here at the Hungaroring in round number 5 of the Alpha Touring Challenge Season 6 in the 1 hour feature race of the Alpha Challenge, we saw in the end Breakfast for Dinner's James Carr win and lead the way by 8 seconds come the finish line over the privateer of Wojciech Swierdowicz in P2 ahead of Francois Schenk P3 for Beaver Buzz Energy. That's your overall podium and also your Alpha podium, with Robert Abrams in the end coming home P4 for Yellow Flag Motorsports, driving all the way from outside the top 10 from P13 P13 to P4 in an absolutely brilliant drive there, flying the way for the team with David Bauer P5 there for breakfast for dinner. Mika Hendricks P6 in that battle for P4 from the very start, but in the end the tyre where for the Haas-Holmes Motorsports Veloster driver, just catching him out right towards the end in the final 10 minutes and taking the pace out the car, but still an earned P6 at that, with James Logsdon P7 leading the way to P7 ahead of Jerome Bajulaz, Jacob Wally and Matt Shepka, who complete your top 10. A special mention of course to Jacob Wally, who took the win in the Delta class today on his debut, and a P9 overall. That's going to be a significant number of points for the privateer, and that'll put him in good stead going into the Christmas break. With then Connor Achtel at P11, best of the rest outside the top 10 for Yellow Flag Motorsports. And then Kurt Smith P12 for Not Last Motorsports, ahead of QZ Motorsports' Adrian Fedorowski. Kurt Smith and Adrian Fedorowski completing your Delta podium alongside Jacob Wally there. That's your top three in the Delta class. Eric Statzer at P14, head of Mark Darnell at P15, finishing a lap down on the field, and then John Hinman finishing a further lap down in P16. The privateer on his debut, having a solid race, albeit not quite on the pace of his peers, but still plenty of rounds to come and plenty of different circuits, and perhaps the Hungaroring just not favouring the rookie and Delta today. Then Justin Rhodes in an unimaginable P17 in the end for the breakfast for dinner driver, battling for so long for P2 versus Kurt Smith, but losing out right at the end with an off track that put him down, finishing 3 laps off of the leaders. And then John Lauzon with that retirement, P18 there with that late retirement in the race, 15 laps from the end. Logan McKenzie retiring 17 laps from the end at P19 for Yellow Flag Motorsports, and I believe that will be counted as a non-classified, given that drivers have to finish at least 50% of the race distance. And James advanced with that very early retirement in what could have been a potential win in the Delta class. The privateer in the end retiring early and only completing 5 laps. Unfortunate end to his debut in the Alpha Touring Challenge in Season 6. Now those are the race results from P1 through to P20 with 20 participants here today. And now the big question, of course, for everybody at home is, how's that changed the complexion of the Drivers' Championship going into round number 6 and also the Christmas break? Well, without further ado, let's bring those standings up for you. And, well, we can see here, firstly, starting off with the Drivers' Championship from 1st through to 10th. Going into the break, it is James Carr who now leads the way by an advantage of what is there 9 points over Mika Hendricks. And, well, it could not be closer between the pair as the story continues. And, well, both drivers giving it everything they possibly can as they wind on through. Behind them, it's Wojciech Swierdowicz who drops to P3 there on 48 points, albeit having dropped there quite recently. He'll still continue to try and press on, but it is James Carr who's jumped into the lead of the championship, as he pointed out, ahead of Mika Hendricks. And well, this top 3 are very close, but it's Hendricks versus Carr that's at the very precipice of the standings. Swierdowicz falling into the clutches of Francois Schink with a gap of 4 points between the two of them. Schink with another solid performance today, looking to really get into the minus Swierdowicz, and also still a major contender. Indeed, anyone inside that top 4 right now looking to be a contender for the overall championship crown. With Robert Abrams there, P5, 5 points clear of teammate Logan McKenzie, moving into that 5th position as of today. Logan McKenzie, with that unfortunate retirement, drops to P6, ahead of Connor Achitella, P7. The Yellow Flag Motorsports trio there, P5 through to P7, all picking up good points in terms of how they'll be able to contribute to their team's championship standings, with Jerome Bajulaz in P8 there, only ahead of David Bauer based on result count back in the battle for P8, and then Matthew Shepka completing the run to the top 10 in P10 there on 164 points, only 1 point off of Bajulaz and David Bauer. And outside the top 10, we can see their best of the rest in the stands. P11, Justin Rhodes, your Delta Championship leader, and 139 points to his name. But the unfortunate thing for Justin Rhodes, of course, is with that finish today, that has severely undermined his charge in the championship standings. And I would not be surprised now if there's a bit of growing pressure on Rhodes, because whilst he continues to hold a clear advantage over Eric Statzer of what is at 26 points, it's not the way he will have wanted it to go, given he went into tonight with an advantage of 35 points. It has been cut down to 26 points, and he won't want it cut any further. Kurt Smith there with a great performance today, P2 in class, of course, moves up to P13 on 100 points, ahead of Adrian Fedorowski, who drops to P14 on 91 points. James Logsdon in P15 now. The Alpha driver continuing to make his way up through the order. The Alpha rookie on his maiden season moves up to P15, and then Dom Savio and Auguste Blondel behind P16, P17, both drivers not in attendance. Kirk Lane as well not in attendance tonight, P18, ahead of Charlie Pouillet, and then we do have Daniel Sedano completing at the top 20. And then coming on to P21 through to P30, we can see John Lauzon with that unfortunate retirement stays in P21 there on 43 points, ahead of Mark Darnell, who moves up into P22 with another solid performance today, 41 points to his name, ahead of the winner, of course, in the Delta class today of Jacob Wally, who now takes 36 points and moves into P23 immediately. And watch out for him if he continues this run of form as we go into the next few rounds. I would not be surprised if you see him very quickly move up into the hunt of the top 20. Indeed, he's quite close to it already. Daniel Smith, P24, behind him he has Joseph Oetzel, Mark Senegal, Sismon Bajuk, and then Aaron Hall and John Himman, who complete the run to P29, with Alex Kotlowski there, only behind Himman based on results countback in P30. And then outside the top 30, we have in P31 Tony Roma ahead of Spencer Cockayne, Samuel Coran, Mark Crawford, Benjamin Harris, Michael Zepp, Ian Maddox, James Vance, Gurkan Demir, and Ryan Windfeld. And then outside the top 40, our last two drivers, P41 through to P42, John Lynch and Stefan Chalafu, yet to get points on the board. Well, those are all the Drivers' Championship standings. And now we come on to the Team Championship standings, of course. And going into the break, it is Breakfast for Dinner who lead the way by 103 points over Beaver Buzz Energy. Now, Breakfast for Dinner, of course, having had the run of points so far in this season, but with a good number of their performances being undermined today, and James Carr really having to deliver major work, and David Bauer as well. But the performance of Justin Rhodes, seeing it fall to a dead stop right at the end, you can imagine how Breakfast for Dinner may be feeling a little bit vulnerable going into the Christmas break, with Beaver Buzz not too far behind. And indeed, 103 points sounds like a lot, but that can change and swing within 2 to 3 rounds at short notice. Yellow Flag Motorsports not too far for Beaver Buzz either, with their performances today on 486 points. 2 great performances, of course, and one performance that wasn't to be from Logan McKenzie, but still Robert Abrams and Connor Achatella both putting in performances that keep them in the hunt. With Talk Steer Racing on 329.5 points there in P4, and what I believe there might be a slight error there in terms of the points between the teams. They are ahead of Hassholes Motorsports, but I believe it should be 349 points for Talk Steer Racing, ahead of the 329.5 for Hassholes Motorsports there, but that'll be corrected as of the next round standings. QZ Motorsports, meanwhile, in P6 and 110 points, ahead of Not Last Motorsports by only 4 points. It's really getting close between the two teams there, and back of the pack Racing, last but not least, on 30 points in P8. But with all the standings covered, ladies and gentlemen, that only leaves us to say one thing now, and that is, thank you very much for watching. And if you have enjoyed the show today and you want to know more about the Alpha Touring Challenge, the ATC, perhaps you're sat there right now having tuned in today and thinking that you're going to be getting an iRacing subscription for Christmas or a new sim racing setup, and you want to be out on the circuit as part of the Alpha Touring Challenge. Well, of course, we do let drivers join at any point in the season. We can always head to our official website. That is the alphatouringchallenge.wordpress.com, or alternatively, you can head to our official Discord, invite link available on screen there, and get to the source of all the action, talk to the drivers, talk to the administrators, and get yourself on the grid. Or if you're not already having visited the website, a brilliant source of information indeed for past seasons and the current season. All the data is available on there, and also join the Discord means you can interact with all the community. A very friendly bunch we are at the Alpha Touring Challenge, I can promise you that. But as our drivers get ready now to put down the sim racing gear and calm it down for Christmas, well, next time, of course, we will be back for round number 6, our next sprint race round, which will be in the United Kingdom at the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. And all the racing action will occur as of what will be Monday the 2nd of January 2023, but we'll be bringing you all the racing action as if it were live on Friday the 6th of January 2023. We've got a little bit of a wait, of course, ladies and gentlemen, and don't let those withdrawal symptoms from touring car racing kick in too much, although I'm definitely going to miss covering it over the next couple of weeks. But what we would like to say in the meantime to everybody tuning in, indeed to all of you at home, from all of us here at the Alpha Touring Challenge community, is that we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for tuning in over the course of the whole of this year. It's been a fantastic year of racing. I'm sure you all agree with Season 5 and also at Season 6. And we've got plenty more racing to come in 2023. And when we pick up our proceedings once again with round number 6, it'll be full engines on, lights out, away we go once more. But whether you're working over Christmas, or alternatively taking time off with family and friends at home, or just spending Christmas alone and having to contemplate on some personal items or anything in between, we hope you're able to put your feet up and relax at some point, switch off, take it easy, and we'll see you all in the new year. But until then, we have been the Alpha Touring Challenge. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Brit in a Spit. And until next time, stay safe, stay smiling, stay warm, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.